If there is any game that would show up in the dictionary next to the word nostalgia, it is The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. In fact, I think barring the 80s as an entire time period, there is probably no single thing I associate with that word more. It's a game both beloved and beleaguered, and is often the center of discussions about what constitutes hype, what constitutes glazing, and whether or not nostalgia makes people view things in a more positive light than they deserve. It's a game that has been called, countless times, the best game of all time, a reputation it held solidly until its very own descendant, The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, entered the ring and made it a real competition 20 years later. In my lifetime, I have seen many posts, articles, and video essays about Ocarina of Time and what makes it so great, but something has bothered me for a long time, and that's the fact that I hear all these reasons given and I just kind of scratch my head. Not because I'll necessarily disagree, but more because I'll sit there thinking is that really true? Is that why I like this game so much? I think I characterize the praise I've heard for Ocarina of Time's key qualities in my head as usually revolving around some central theme that people keep insisting ties the game together. Usually this has to do with the time mechanic, and words like youth, innocence, lost time, and growth get thrown around. I couldn't point to an exact example, but I swear I've seen at least 2 instances of people saying that Ocarina of Time is, at its core, a game about the inevitability of growing up and leaving childhood behind. And I guess? But this take doesn't speak to me and get me to nod my head the way I do when I hear people describe Majora's Mask as a heart-wrenching, somber journey about the growth of individuals and the regrets people hold on to, and the people they become when times are dire. I hear someone go into depth about that, and I'm sitting there drinking my beer, happily agreeing, because that's exactly what I experienced when playing the game. It was communicated to me in full, and it's a major reason why I like the game. I would say almost every Zelda game I've played to completion and absorbed into my roster of knowledge about the series has a similar key element that makes it so enjoyable for me to play and connect with it. For Majora's Mask, it's the dark tone and focus on interpersonal journeys. For Wind Waker, it's the vibrant, fluid world and the absolute dedication to the aesthetic. For Twilight Princess, it's the dramatic storytelling and glimmering, naturalistic take on the world of Hyrule. For Breath of the Wild, it's the genuine sense of connection with the setting, the superb game design focused on exploration of a post-apocalyptic world. In all of these cases, I wouldn't have trouble telling you exactly why you should play the game and would enjoy it. Ocarina of Time is the odd one out on that front. Because I don't at all disagree that this is one of the best games ever released, nostalgia or no, but I want to communicate why I feel that way, and that's why this video exists. But who, in 2026, almost 30 years after it came out, hasn't played Ocarina of Time? Is there even such a thing? If someone hasn't played it by now, surely that's because they wouldn't enjoy it anyway, right? Well, I don't know. But that's the hypothetical audience for this video. Someone who, in 2026, hasn't played Ocarina of Time and really wants to know why they should. Since I really don't have a carefully plotted out outline for a video like this, what I'm going to do instead is just recap the game and put a spotlight on details I really enjoyed. So I really hope you enjoy it too. I'm gonna do you a favor and not glaze the title screen cinematics, even though I could. In exchange though, I will say, I love the way Zelda games used to do their menu selects. That gentle fairy fountain theme, piano notes over that early morning deep blue sky, clouds just drifting lazily by. Feels like something we've lost. But anyway. I vividly remember so much about this game, yet every few years when I decide to replay it, I'm always caught off guard by the opening. The openings to Zelda games always get remembered for what happens and what gets done or established. Ocarina of Time, for all the chatter it generates, starts in complete silence. Slow white text over a black screen silence. A narrator introduces himself as the Deku Tree and describes his home, a deep forest full of children, each of whom has a guardian fairy, but for one. A dimly lit view of a wooden-walled room is shown, with the boy in question tossing and turning in the midst of some nightmare. We get a glimpse of the scenes haunting his dreams, a prophetic vision of a castle gate opening as the storm pours down, and the young boy watching a princess pass by, and a dark knight arrive to menace him. The view fades back to show a close-up of the Deku Tree as he speaks to a fairy named Navy, and he tasks her with finding that boy and setting him on a journey to save Hyrule from a great evil. What I think is worth noting is how this isn't presented as good or glamorous, and in fact the Deku Tree sounds afraid, and he makes the situation sound dire, even saying he doesn't have much time left. The music helps convey that something really bad is happening beyond the immediate setting we're about to explore. Where before there was only darkness, we then get a vivid bright green world on display as Navy makes her iconic flight, passing by the boy's neighbors and saying hi, and even bumping into a wooden fence in her hurry to find him. She flies right into his house, and so Link meets Navy. You, as Link, get the summons to go see the Deku Tree, a very important figure to the Kakiri, a race of childlike inhabitants that call the forest home. You wander around Link's house and then outside, where your neighbor, Saria, comes to greet you. Another thing that feels like it's been left behind in the generations since Ocarina hit the scenes is games that expect you to talk to NPCs. Talking to NPCs by itself has a very optional feel these days, since most any game with any budget will filter any important details through cutscenes. But every NPC, if they're not contributing directly by teaching you game mechanics, and most will, they'll instead fill in some detail about Link's life. Chiefly that he's a bit of an outcast among the Kokiri, having been the only one without a fairy, and singled out by de facto leader Mido for bullying, but nonetheless well liked by Saria, who doesn't really bother with Mido's nonsense. For all that there's some mystical group of fae who build their houses directly from giant trees, the Kokiri have a pretty sweet life, even having their own store where the shopkeep can't see over the counter. Money may not grow on trees, but it apparently does grow in shrubs, and you'll need to scrounge up enough to buy a shield and then lay hands on a sword in order to get approval from Mido to actually go see the Deku Tree. Once you do, things immediately take a tone shift. The Deku Tree describes the nightmares Link's been having as a symptom of the climate of evil descending on Hyrule, and as a result, it's going to take someone with courage, someone like Link, to stand up to it. The first test is going to be breaking the curse on the Deku Tree, requiring venturing inside him, and so you get your very first dungeon. Dungeon crawling is what Zelda is all about. It's a core part of the series' identity, and doing it in 3 dimensions for the first time really let developers play with things like scale and atmosphere, which I like. The inside of the Deku Tree is massive, and climbing and descending is key to navigating it. You immediately get clued in on the relative importance of the spiderweb covering up the central hole, and Navy will draw your attention to the fact that you can actually look down and see more of the level through the gaps. Since it responds to your weight when you walk over it, it's just a question of how to get past it. Climbing the vines on the walls will take you to the upper levels and get you some decent gear for your journey, as well as introduce you to the local hostile species, the Skulltulas and the Deku Scrubs. The former are giant spiders with very unsettling patterns on their backs, and the latter are squat plant people that hide in grass and spit nuts at intruders. A key hint about jumping from high places and not splattering on the ground points you towards the obvious path downward. Just fall through the web from high enough to punch through it. Doing so nets you access to the root system of the Deku Tree, and eventually the first boss. I do really love this moment, as a major cool moment not associated with a boss, leaping from the highest floor of the dungeon down to the lowest. Feels like a precursor to the skydiving that would eventually find its way back to the Zelda series as a major key ability. Quite honestly, for all the love Ocarina gets, I never hear enough praise for how evocative and just how eerie the first boss is. You're a small, lightly armed 12-year-old kid. This lone room is the only one where the light from the outside world doesn't reach, making it incredibly dark, and as soon as you're locked in, you hear a scuttling movement coming from everywhere, but nothing confronts you. It's only when you think to look at the ceiling that you are challenged by the dungeon's boss, Goma. The ambience, the lighting, the colors are all top-notch. Just the size of Goma and its imposing appearance made me want to get some good distance between me and this evil spider-scorpion monster. It should be pointed out that between the Deku Babas, the Skulltulas, and the Deku Scrubs, every enemy up until now will just stay in place and leave you alone unless you walk up to it. Goma, by comparison, has freedom of movement and will actually chase you, a distinction that goes unnoticed by most players, but subtly amps up the tension in this fight. Another thing I think goes unnoticed by most is the way Goma's glowing green body is covered in thick black armor, just like the Dark Knight that was haunting Link's nightmares, and its large vivid eye even somewhat resembles the jewel in the headdress he wore.
Look!
Goma will try to smash you with its forelegs and has a big, obvious opening whenever it can be stunned as its eye glows red. Once you strike it, it backs off and climbs up onto the ceiling, and if it's not interrupted, will birth Goma eggs that hatch into larvae that will harass you. Deal it enough damage though, and it falls, its body burning away into ash as the evil magic giving it form dissolves. Left in its wake are your first heart container, and the magical equivalent of an elevator back to the surface. One of the first gut punches Ocarina of Time reveals from its deck is that Link succeeds, but the Deku Tree dies anyway, having been too far gone to save. Before he dies, he gives the monologue explaining the creation myth of Hyrule. 3 golden goddesses shaping the world and the life within it. Din, the goddess of power, created the earth, raw and new, out of the chaos. Nehru, the goddess of wisdom, created the laws of space-time and the natural order. Faror, the goddess of courage, created all life on the planet. After doing this, they left this universe, leaving behind an object called the Triforce, 3 golden triangles which grant the desire of anyone who lays hands on it. The Triforce, and the ultimate power it bestows, is what drove the Dark Knight to put the curse on the Deku Tree. What the Deku Tree had withheld is called a spiritual stone, a sacred object associated with the forest that is one of the 4 keys needed to open the gateway to the sacred realm where the Triforce waits. Giving it to Link, with instructions to meet with the Princess of Hyrule, is the last thing the Deku Tree does before his life expires before our very eyes. His bark turns gray and lifeless, and his leaves start to wither and fall. Link heads off, accompanied by Navy, who turns to give one last silent look at her fallen friend before she flies away. In the wake of this scene, the Kokiri Forest's cheerful music kicking back in almost seems off-putting, blitheringly happy despite the grief the characters are undoubtedly feeling. You head back out, breaking the hard news to Mido, who of course blames you, and you go off to meet your destiny. If you've talked to the Kokiri and read the hints around the village beforehand, you'll know that the Kokiri aren't supposed to leave the forest, with it being said that they'll die if they do. Whether it's being implied that they won't survive away from the shelter of the forest, or simply that their life force is tied to it, is never made clear, but at this point Link tests the theory. Unfortunately, before he can fully do so, he's stopped by a friend, Saria. The scene is very quiet, with only the nighttime sounds of owls and other forest creatures in the background giving any backdrop to Saria's conversation with Link. This scene is one of my favorites, because while the Kokiri are painted as childlike and innocent, it's also made clear that Saria is unusually perceptive for a kid her age. She was waiting at the bridge leading to the outside world, having known that Link would be leaving soon just by intuition. She's taken notice that Link is simply different from the other kids, including her, and knows that she can't stop him from going, and she doesn't try, simply telling him that it's okay because they'll always be friends. She gives him an ocarina, a flute-like musical instrument, and asks that he take good care of it. She says that she hopes he'll think of her when he plays it, and maybe come back to the forest to visit sometime. I've always liked this scene and related to it, even if it left some people scratching their heads. Link, being a silent protagonist, obviously he doesn't answer, but the fact that he doesn't give Saria an answer is significant here, instead hesitating and running away as she sadly watches him go. The silence is pointed, underscoring how Link doesn't know what lies ahead and can't promise his best friend, his only friend, that he'll ever be able to come back. He can't face her, so he doesn't. What must be faced, though, is his destiny, lying beyond the borders of the forest. And so we're introduced to Hyrule Field. An experience shared by every single person who has ever played this game is wandering out into open Hyrule Field, meeting the owl that talks your ear off, and then rolling across Hyrule Field as fast as possible so you can get into Castle Town before the gate closes. Gebora Gebora, the giant owl, is kind of like a familiar or guardian angel for Link, being wise and stopping by on his journey to give advice every once in a while. Unfortunately, that advice doesn't include Hyrule Field is haunted by the living dead at night, so hurry on to town. 8-year-old me could not believe I was having to fight skeletons all night just for missing curfew and getting the gate shut in my face. Castletown is occupied by townspeople with their trivial daily lives and worries, and a fair few interesting individuals you want to meet. You can explore the shops, try your luck at the shooting gallery, listen to gossip, explore the quiet back alleys, and if you head northeast, you can step into the very important and vastly iconic Temple of Time. I love the design of the Temple of Time. I love how when you walk up to the front pathway, everything is quiet with the whistling of the wind, and I love how the inside of the temple is brilliant white and gray stonework with a ridiculously wide central hall and a stupidly high ceiling. Not features this place actually needs from a gameplay standpoint, since you're only ever going to do a couple things here, but simply to convey that this is a place of worship and a sacred location, with light shining down from the high-set windows and a massive stone door at the far end of the hall, beyond which is supposedly the Sacred Realm, and within it, the Triforce. Since there's no reason to stay here, you go back into town and talk to the suspiciously cheerful-looking girl who says that she's come to town to find her dad, who was supposed to deliver milk but hasn't come home yet. If you ask around town, a few people will chat about the Princess of Hyrule and her unique quirks, so it's time to head north towards the castle. The owl is back, explaining that on the castle grounds, time flows normally, like in Hyrule Field, distinct from Castletown or other isolated locations like Kokiri Forest, where it stays locked at whatever time it is when you arrive there. This isn't a plot point, just a game mechanic, since select elements of the game are tied to what time it is and you wouldn't be able to do them freely if time flowed the same in every area. If you leave and come back, you'll find the little girl I mentioned earlier, named Malin, singing to herself. She's from the ranch outside of town, and her dad is known to be a bit of a bumbler. She gives you an egg, which hatches into a chicken at the rising of the sun. With that, it's a sneaking game to get into the castle without getting spotted by the guards. On the way, you'll use the rooster you got from Malin to wake up her father Talon, opening the way to sneak in further until finally you found your way to the castle courtyard. What follows is the scene where you meet Princess Zelda, and this is really a common contender for favorite scene in the game for me. The directors were just feeling themselves with those camera angles and sound cues. You walk up to her while she's spying through the window, and she immediately asks if you got the spiritual stone. Like Link, Zelda has prophetic dreams, but hers are much more detailed, which gave her insight into the danger Hyrule was facing and who would come to save it. Entrusted with Link's status as the hero, she goes into detail on the Triforce, explaining that the power of the gods has the potential to plunge Hyrule into an era of chaos, or lead it to salvation, and as such, the ancient sages built the Temple of Time to protect it from evildoers. The Door of Time, the massive stone barrier in the temple, only opens for someone who's collected 3 spiritual stones and plays an instrument called the Ocarina of Time. She has the Ocarina, but the spiritual stones are being sought out by someone else. She points Link's gaze toward the window, where you can see the Royal Hall, and the Dark Knight from Link's Nightmare, the one who cursed the Deku Tree with death. She identifies him as Ganondorf, leader of the Gerudo tribe who live in the desert far to the west, and has warned her father that he's feigning his allegiance and is dangerous, but naturally he didn't listen. She feels a sense of impending doom, having sussed out that Ganondorf wants the Triforce, and having seen what he'll do to get it, we have no reason to doubt her. Since Ganondorf will track the keys to the Sacred Realm no matter where they're hidden, and kill or besiege anyone who tries to get in his way, the only option is to take his goal out of reach before he destroys Hyrule. Thus begins a partnership lasting ages. Zelda signs a letter clearing Link to get past the guards to Death Mountain, and instructs her attendant, Impa, to escort him out. Impa is a member of the Sheikah tribe, a seemingly extinct race of shadow warriors who worked in service to the King of Hyrule long ago, and as their only remaining member, Impa takes care of Zelda. She teaches Link one of the most iconic songs of the franchise, Zelda's Lullaby, with the understanding that the song itself has mysterious powers and effects and serves as proof that he's aligned with the royal family. She leads him out of the castle and then gives him further instruction to visit Kakariko, the nearby village situated at the foot of Death Mountain, and to gear up properly before starting the journey. And you could do that, or you could just explore Hyrule, right? A common stopping point around this time for most players is Long Long Ranch, sitting in the geographic center of Hyrule Field, where Malon and Talon live. Ocarina of Time, back in its day, heavily advertised the ability to travel on horseback, which means a player who wants that sense of freedom will be visiting the ranch at some point. It's a pretty big place, with cows, chickens, horses, and a sense of an easygoing farm life. Talon hangs out inside, dozing off, while his resentful ranch hand Ingo tends to the cows. You meet Malon and she'll introduce you to her favorite pony, Epona, easily spotted thanks to being a deep red color. Epona is not too fond of strangers, running away when you get close. Listening to Malon singing along should get the brain gears working, and if you take out your ocarina, she'll teach you Epona's song. Successfully playing it gets Epona to warm up to you pretty quickly. I do love that this era of Zelda put so much focus on music, truly. Of the 12 songs you're going to learn in the game, you'll hear 6 of them as background music throughout the world before learning to play them yourself. You hear the melody of Zelda's Lullaby in the castle courtyard before learning it, and then you hear the melody of Epona's song throughout the ranch backtrack before learning to play that too. Sad as it is to say, Link's too small to ride a horse at this time, but at least he's got the song and can visit anytime he likes. The next step on the journey is Kakariko. Kakariko Village is one of the most important places in the game, with a storied history, dark secrets, and being the primary access point to the active volcano looking out over Hyrule. Allegedly, it was once closed off to all but the Sheikah, but Impa opened it to the public. Its people are nice enough, and the 3 primary features of the village are its windmill, its well, and its graveyard. The well is not important right now, and if you go to the windmill, you'll hear a catchy song being played on a phonograph by its lone occupant, but there's not much to do elsewise. The main point of interest is the graveyard, which you can tell is a place of significance by the way the background music stops when you enter. This graveyard is alleged to be where the royal family buries their dead. During the daytime, the grounds are stomped by a little kid who's into spooky things, and at night, the gravekeeper, Dompe, hosts his grave digging tour. If you head up to the graves on top of the hill, you can read the tombstones of the royal composer brothers, after which their ghosts will appear and attack. Defeat them, and they'll tell you of how they were charged by the royal family with studying magic music, and their secrets led Ganondorf to attack and eventually kill them trying to learn them. Supposedly, they created a song that can control the flow of time, so with that major hint, it's time to open some graves. You play Zelda's Lullaby in front of the royal tomb, and things get very dark. A storm starts up, and lightning strikes the tomb, blasting it open. Entering the tomb will demand some bravery, which most of us that play this as kids remember not quite being enough. The inside of the tomb is dark and creepy with bats hovering all over the place, and the door at the far end is barred shut until they've all been KO'd. This is good practice for both the slingshot you got in the Deku Tree and being aware of your surroundings, since the bats will blend in with the dark walls and flutter around if they're disturbed. There's an ambience but no proper background music. If you examine some of the bones laying around the room, they'll either speak to you or you're reading something inscribed on them, can't tell which, and both options are disturbing. They describe that intruders into the tomb will be attacked by the Lurkers in the Dark, and instruct messengers of the royal family to shine light on the living dead. It's worth noting that you fought both ghosts and animated skeletons at this point, and while unsettling, they weren't that big of a deal, so what exactly is this tomb trying to warn you about? Go into the next room and you'll find out. Behold the Redeads, the lasting trauma of everyone who played this game as a child. Redeads are tall, naked, zombie-like figures with wooden mask-like faces that stand in place, twitching every so often. Their presence is announced by echoing moans in any room you find them, and compared to the other enemies you face thus far, they're incredibly dangerous. The reason for this is that if they detect you nearby, they'll scream and freeze you in place, slowly ambling towards you and then jumping onto you to bite at your neck. Although you can sneak past them, you won't have any way of knowing that since it's not announced to you, and if you aren't able to get Navy's tattle on them telling you how to escape them, they'll just chew your neck open until you die, and they're unreasonably tough, so even if you know how to kill them, you can run the risk of dying. These things kept me from advancing any further in the tomb as a kid because I couldn't figure out how to get past them or defeat them, so I just went elsewhere until I played again as an adult with a better sense of what to do. Worth noting is what else exactly playing as an adult highlighted to me, and I think it's worth stopping at this point to ask why the fuck the Redead's attack animation looks like that. I know we have all thought this at some point. Resident Evil came out before Ocarina of Time, and I don't remember the zombies in those games swiveling behind Chris Redfield and wrapping their limbs around his waist to get at his neck, unless I just played the wrong version of the game. What the fuck were the game devs smoking when making it look like the scariest enemies of the game were sexually assaulting you to death? Anyway, as a kid I wasn't able to get past them, but a few years later I was able to play better and successfully delved further into the tomb. To this day, I'm still a little disappointed that there wasn't a whole labyrinthine set of passageways making up an optional dungeon down here, and it's really just 3 rooms total. The bottom of the well we explore later is nice, but this place had a really top-notch creepy atmosphere. In the third and final room in the tomb, you'll find the notes to the Composer Brothers' song scratched into the headstone. It is the Sun's song, and the notes are telling me the little jingle you hear out in the overworld every time morning arrives. The song is dual purpose. The first use it serves is to, indeed, control time, fast-forwarding to either morning or dusk. The second use is that it will shine light on Redeads, freezing them in place and allowing you to navigate their chambers unharassed. Would that this were the last time anything super creepy happened in Kakariko, but it's not. If you leave the graveyard and head back out into the village proper, you can find a house that you'll be returning to often, unlocked, just sitting out in the open, and if you go inside, it's a single massive room that's all dark and covered in cobwebs. Waiting here are the wealthiest family in the land, who are now cursed and take the form of horrifying skull-like creatures with human faces merged into them. Although they look scary, they're docile and beg you to save them by killing the Spiders of the Curse, the gold skulltulas that hide throughout the land and in the dungeons. You'll want to make a point of doing this and collecting as many kills as you can, because there's some genuinely good upgrades they give you for doing so. Before you leave for the rest of your journey, it's worth coming back to the graveyard at night to open up some more graves. If you can brave the Redeads, you'll be able to find a stronger shield, which, trust me, you'll want, especially given you don't have to pay 80 rupees for it. With all that out of the way, it's time to finally explore Despite the name, the volcano's actually pretty peaceful. Going here introduces you to the Gorons, a race who are both made out of and eat rocks and stone, and their city lies at the heart of the mountain. Unfortunately, Ganondorf has paid a visit to these people too, and their mining quarry, the Dodongo's Cavern, has been besieged to harass them into giving him the spiritual Stone of Fire. Not only is the entrance sealed off, but even if they were able to get in, it's full of fire-breathing monsters now. You're nudged into seeking out the Goron's big brother figure, Darunia, to get more information. By using Zelda's Lullaby, you can open up Darunia's quarters, but he's not in any mood to talk. If you try playing your Ocarina, you'll get some of the funniest scenes possible as he starts to dance, but Zelda's Lullaby isn't really what he's got in mind. The song you'll need is actually back in the forest, and you'll be pleased to know that there's a shortcut directly to there. You'll end up in the Lost Woods, essentially the wider forest surrounding the relatively docile Kokiri Forest. It's worth noting that you can technically come here from the very start of the game. The entrance is on the hill behind Mido's house, and you can freely access it. There's not much point in doing so though, since the Lost Woods, while it has some interesting things in it, doesn't lead anywhere unless you can navigate the identical hollows that will just send you back to the start if you choose the wrong route. On this occasion though, you'll be able to use a special trick courtesy of the owl to find your way through. The backtrack has been altered, and when you hear the full song coming from one of the hollows, you'll know that's the right route. You follow the sound of the music, and you'll find yourself in a very important place, the Sacred Forest Meadow. This is one of the moments I've been looking forward to talking about, as a particular moment that sticks out and highlights just why Ocarina of Time is the game of all time for me. Something about this particular location just makes it stick, and I think I know what it is. It's a sense of scale. Just speaking of surface area, the Sacred Forest Meadow isn't really that big compared to anywhere else in the game, and it's certainly not the massive games we're familiar with today. But the hallways are narrow and tight, yet the walls are low, which gives a sense of layering to the environment, since you can see the world just beyond the small barriers in the way. There are high hills closing off the region from outside view, and excellent use is made of the golden fog that covers distant objects in the forest settings, so that things in the distance slowly come into view as if sunlight is streaming on them. All of this comes together to create one of those set pieces that, like the Temple of Time, feels like it wasn't created specifically for your adventure. It existed here long before you, and will exist hereafter. You'll revisit this area as an adult, but at this point in the game, you don't have any way of knowing that. The building at the back of the meadow with its stairway, long ago broken in some event eons past, exists independently of you. It doesn't care about you or what you're going through, and you have no way to explore it, nor any reason to expect you ever will. Everything just feels so big and old and impassive, with you just passing through on your journey. It'll take getting past some hostile creatures to get to the far end of the area, but once you do, you are once again reunited with Saria. She's thrilled you've come to visit, saying she has a feeling this area is going to be important for both of you one day. You still have the song she gave you, so she teaches you the song she was playing on hers, Saria's song. This song is high-tempo, associated with the mysticism of the forest, and will let you telepathically talk to Saria anytime you want, regardless of distance, as if your Ocarina were a little phone. More importantly, this is the tune Darunia needs to hear before his mood will improve enough to actually play ball. Traveling back to Goron City, if you play it for him, he'll dance his ass off, and then finally expound more on the troubles the Gorons are going through. He doesn't exactly say he believes in you or expects you to help, but he does give you an important item, the Goron's bracelet. This is one of the first times in the game that you actually feel yourself getting stronger, not just adding new gear to your inventory, but changing how Link interacts with the game environment. Formerly just a little guy with a limited amount of strength available, the Goron's bracelet improves his physical strength to the point that he can uproot the explosive flowers growing in certain places. Doing so, you blast open the entrance to your next dungeon, the Dodongo's Cavern. The Dodongo's Cavern is a much bigger and more complex dungeon than the Deku Tree was, with bigger, wider spaces and a more imposing presence. Lava pits are everywhere, and a lot of the enemies either breathe fire or are on fire, posing a risk to your wooden shield, and it's here that you'll be faced with more dangerous enemies like the Lizalfos and the Dodongos themselves. The puzzles and traps are both a tad bit more complex, and you're required to think about vertical spaces more often. The item you get in the dungeon is a bomb bag, allowing you to carry explosives, which will be necessary since these are critical to the rest of the game. Just like with the Deku Tree, this one has an epic moment that I really like. The massive Dodongo statue, perhaps made from a fossilized skeleton, dominates the far end of the dungeon's atrium, and the dungeon map indicates there's something beyond it. You toss bombs down through the gaps in the rope bridge above, setting off explosions in its eye sockets such that they glow red and cause the jaw to open, revealing a door. I always liked to imagine that maybe this reaction happened because the explosions triggered volcanic materials in the eye sockets into glowing as a heat response, and that maybe that burned away some hidden bindings holding the lower jaw up. Once you do that, it's a few short puzzles and then the dungeon's boss, King Dodongo. This fight is much less cramped and more chaotic than Goma, though not exactly difficult. The way the King Dodongo's jaw opens with that massive gape is so intimidating, and it's your cue to launch bombs down his throat before he can finish charging that insane fire blast it's got. Of course, since the boss only has 4 health points, you can actually finish it in one strike by doing a jump attack with a Deku Stick, but you didn't hear that from me. Once you defeat it and get back outside, Darunia is so impressed with your giant steel ball that he officially declares the two of you sworn brothers, noting that Link, a little kid, risked his life for essentially a race of strangers. Cementing this trust is the spiritual stone of fire, which he then gives you. That's 2 stones down, 1 to go. Of course, your business on Death Mountain isn't complete until you go see what's happening up on its summit, since you can do that now. It's said that a great fairy lives up there, so why not pay a visit? This is where you learn that, yes, Death Mountain is an active volcano and will drop giant, flaming rocks on your head at a moment's notice. Hope everyone in Kakariko is okay. As a side note, almost everyone I've ever seen play this game whips out their Hylian shield to survive the falling pyroclastic flow, but you can use your Deku shield and be just fine. It's a little faster since you don't have to turtle in place. If you dip into the volcanic crater itself, you'll be confronted with heat so intense that it will burn you alive if you stay too long, which sounds like a great risk to run if it means grabbing another gold Skulltula and a piece of art. Just outside, you can blast open the fairy's fountain, and the Great Fairy officially gives you a magic meter, powering up your sword attacks and allowing you to use spells, but you don't have any spells yet. She'll unsubtly nudge you towards an area back in the castle grounds you undoubtedly saw, but passed by given it was blocked off by a now very explodable boulder, saying her sister lives there. And of course, if you want a shortcut back down to the village, your good friend the Giant Owl is happy to provide it too. I've always delighted in using this shortcut. It's such a fun little scene and instills me with this childlike joy. Like, look at me, I'm flying! First order of business is heading off to Castletown, meeting that fairy, and grabbing your first spell. Fittingly, it's called Din's Fire. It's expensive as hell to use, but it looks badass, and it surrounds Link with a giant expanding fireball so that he can set things ablaze. So, with that out of the way, what about that third spiritual stone? Going to an area that's relatively chill has to be a relief after dodging fireballs while scaling an actual volcano. Zora's River is the somewhat back and forth trek towards Zora's Domain that a player will have to make, going uphill the entire way. For those side quest inclined and looking to get every heart container possible, here's where you'll buy the magic beans, and I did the math for you. It's 550 rupees to get all of them. The northeastern end of the river houses a shortcut back to the Lost Woods, and the domain itself is blocked off by a massive rushing waterfall. One of my favorite things about this game is the little aesthetic touches they put into it. When you play Zelda's Lullaby here, the water's flow slows down to the point you can get past it to the entrance. They could have just had a sluice gate or something randomly activate to let you in, but instead there's an inscription about how when the King of Hyrule sleeps, so do the falls. So the river sleeps when you play the lullaby. Brilliant, artistic. Zora's Domain is beautiful, and has some of the most iconic music you're going to hear from this series, embodying that gentle and relaxing feel that water is so often associated with. There's some interesting things you can do here, including an instance of a minigame actually being mandatory. No one cares though because it's both fun and lucrative. You dive off the falls and race to collect rupees on a timer, which you get to keep. The diving instructor gives you a special item to increase your diving depth if you win. Why is this important? Because the next plot point is going to require going deeper underwater. King Zora isn't concerned about any spiritual stone, he's worrying over his missing daughter, the Zora Princess. So something will have to be done about that. One of those same shortcuts that exists between Death Mountain and the Lost Woods also exists between Zora's Domain, the origin point of Hyrule's River, and Lake Hylia, its endpoint. If you were just exploring the game naturally, you'd probably wander over here eventually just because you can. The lake is the most massive body of water in the game, and the whole area is stunning. A wonderful kind of landmark where you can just easily commit every detail to memory. If you talk to the Zora you'll find here, you'll hear from them that they're trying to find the missing Zora Princess. Their eye for clues sucks because a bottle containing a letter is easily visible from the surface, but you'll need to dive 6 meters to get it. The message inside the bottle is from Princess Ruto, saying she's inside Jabu Jabu's belly. Jabu Jabu is the guardian deity of the Zora's Domain, kind of like the Deku Tree is for the Kokiri Forest. Given she's obviously in need of some kind of rescue, you take the letter back to King Zora, and he drags his fat ass out from in front of the entrance to Zora's fountain. The Zora's Fountain is the wellspring of all the water in Hyrule, which is kind of crazy considering there's a fucking enormous whale sitting in the middle of it. I don't want to think about how much whale piss is diluting their water. Ruto is inside Jabu Jabu, you need to rescue her, and the easiest way inside is just to get eaten. Go outside, grab a fish in that bottle, and deposit it in front of this absolute unit, and boom, you found your next dungeon. It's been hinted at that Jabu Jabu isn't too healthy lately, and that Ganondorf is probably responsible. You'll get to know just what that means in one of the most visceral dungeons Zelda ever produced. The entire inside of this creature's body is the dungeon. As in, the walls are made of flesh, the switches are nerve bundles, and the doors are sphincters. Obviously, there's a lot of parasites running amok down in this poor fish's gut, and quite a lot of the hostiles are bioelectric, presenting a pretty obvious danger if you're not careful. You'll actually meet Princess Ruto here about halfway through, and she's a classic tsundere-style character. That is to say, she's rude and pretty spoiled, if well-meaning. You'll need to rescue her more than once, including from a disgusting octopus creature whose glowing, nerve-flap-opening thing is one of the most nauseating details about this game. I didn't ask to see all that. Before I forget to say this, I love both this dungeon and the environmental storytelling within it. I know that phrase gets passed around a lot, but it's worth using here. It's never spelled out for you, but it's made clear through the way Jabu Jabu's insides look that there's a parasite killing him. Holes have been burrowed through the walls and floor of his gut, and his intestinal tracts are ugly and discolored. The first and most recent burrow dug through his GI tract is just tinged pinkish red and flush, while the next one has become a deep blue color as the host body gets deoxygenated. The tract that's had the most damage done to it is a vivid green, as all the flesh has become pus-filled and infected. By the time you get to the area just outside the boss arena, that nasty green hue has spread basically all through the walls and floors. Zelda's never attempted a dungeon this visceral and fleshy since 1998, which is kind of a shame. Imagine how beautifully gory the details would look with modern hardware. You open the way through the dungeon by severing the tentacles the main parasite is digging through the host body, which eventually gets you into the area where the actual boss resides. This creepy thing is called Baronade, and its fight is one of the most action-packed in the game, which I love. It'll shield itself with jellyfish and aim giant electric blasts at you, using energy as it's sucked from Jabu Jabu, and you'll use the dungeon item, the boomerang, to sever the tentacles sucking nutrients out of him. This is one of the only fights in the game where the boss uses both defensive and offensive tactics at the same time, trying to blast you while shielding itself with spinning jellyfish, and sinking down into Jabu Jabu's body when weak to try and keep itself alive. The detail on this is very dedicated. The tentacles attaching it to the ceiling can be seen with electricity flowing down them from the fleshy ceiling, and after you sever them, they'll drip green fluid over the boss arena floor as it moves around. You take out its defenses and finally weaken it to the point where Jabu Jabu's antibodies take over and dismantle it entirely. As a result of your bravery, you get a heart container, and you might very well say you get Princess Ruto's heart too. She gives you the Zora Sapphire after the battle, which in Zora culture is equivalent to a marriage proposal, so Link's been burdened with a lot of expectations here. There's a couple of other notable things about Zora's fountain, including another fairy fountain blocked off by an explodable wall in the back, which will give you the warping spell you can use to navigate dungeons. Everything else, though, will have to wait until later. If you're just trying to play the game to complete it, this is where you would move on to the next plot point, but if I were sitting here playing the game for the first time, I wouldn't be too fussed about plot points, and I would just be having fun exploring. And it's my hope that you would too. So instead of jumping into what happens next in the story, I'm going to expound on all of the other things you can do while exploring Hyrule as Link. Not knowing where to go when playing Ocarina of Time is virtually impossible these days, considering how famous the game is, how long it's been out, and how easy it is to find guides online. But if you're a little kid in 1998 just trying to have fun, you're not running off from plot point A to plot point B, you're trying to find cool shit to do. The market is full of places to have fun, and I think one of my favorite things is that certain shops aren't open during certain hours or only open later in the story. The mask shop run by a particular unsettling character opens first, but then you can also play at a bowling alley where the bowling balls are explosives, and there's also shady shops that open at night in the back alley, including a gambling house. So much detail that was really just there to make the game world richer and more fun. Also, there's a lot of Hyrule to explore beyond just the immediate directives to save the day. Almost all of your adventuring has taken place on the east side of Hyrule and not touched the south or west, but if you go past Lon Lon Ranch and start heading west, you'll come to a more rocky, sandy path that leads into many a gamer's favorite area in the game. It's not hard to see why. As soon as you enter, some very Latin beats start up, the same kind that Kill Bill and Bleach loved so much. You'll get treated to the banger that is the Gerudo Valley soundtrack. Gerudo Valley marks the point where Hyrule territory ends and Gerudo territory begins, with the Gerudo being a very distinctly ethnic race of people marked by darker skin, vivid red hair, and the fact that they're all women but for one, the Gerudo King, Ganondorf himself. You being a little kid, you don't really have any means of getting past the guard who bars the way to their fortress, but who cares? There's so much to see. Gerudo Valley, just relative to the player, is probably one of the most massive areas of any game released before 2002-ish, and nearly all of that is the vertical walls of the fucking insanely deep ravine formed by the river carving through Hyrule. The sign says not to jump, but let's face it, you're gonna jump, aren't you? Of course you are. Leap off the edge, watch Link take that diving stance, and see how long it takes you to hit the bottom. The experience is, by itself, incredible. Hyrule's river will inevitably carry you to Lake Hylia, also one of the biggest areas in the game, which is where the natural beauty of Hyrule really comes to the fore. I'd like you to pause this video now and just go and listen to the complete Hyrule Field theme from Ocarina of Time. It's available dozens of times over on YouTube. The full thing is over 5 minutes long, so just listen to it from start to finish. You'll hear the theme that plays in the morning, as well as the parts that loop in certain places, during encounters with enemies, or when the sun sets. The evening loop is especially beautiful. Wasn't that nice? I swear, if you ask current Nintendo musical talent to make you an epic boss theme, they can do it, but if you ask them to make you 5 minutes worth of distinct, incredible background music for standing out in the middle of the fields, I don't know, it feels like we've lost that. In contrast to Gerudo Valley, there's a lot to do here.
The lake scientist lives here, there's the ever-iconic fishing hole, and there's some interesting landmarks, including the tree with the weird claw marks and the strange inscription, both on the central island. There's also a couple of scarecrows stood near the edge of the water that you can talk to. They'll let you play music for them, with one letting you practice the ocarina as much as you want to get the notes right, and the other letting you construct your own 8-note song. Although it's not necessary for game completion, you'll want to do this if you like finding little secret areas throughout the game later on. Besides being beautiful, I love that Lake Hylia is such a natural-feeling, lived-in location in this game. It isn't like Castle Courtyard, which literally only exists to be traversed once, or Goron City, where the area is fun to move through but doesn't feel like a place people actually live in. Between the lake scientists, the fishing hole, the scarecrows, and the bridges to the central island, not to mention the Zora congregating in the area looking for Princess Ruto, all make it feel like people lived here before Link came along, and will have lives outside of him after he's left. There's even multiple entry and exit points to the area, and multiple ways to leave, including hitching another ride on your owl friend. The fishing hole is an area you can lose hours and hours of time in, and that's very much on purpose, since the day and night cycle stays intact, but the crowing rooster and howling wolf sounds have been removed to give the player peace. There's other things you can do if you want to keep exploring. You can use bombs to go caving by exposing holes in the ground all over Hyrule, and plenty have unique environments, rewards, or both. You can also go back to the Lost Woods and try finding all the secret areas in that location. For example, there's multiple Skull Kids you can find playing their flutes all day and all night. And if you take a left at a very specific point in the route to the Sacred Forest Meadow, you'll find the Deku stage. Remember when I mentioned the mask shop? You can bring different masks to this location and wear them to see how the audience of Deku Scrubs will respond. And they have different masks they like or dislike and will have different reactions to. There's absolutely nothing here for a player who just wants to complete the game quickly, but it's immensely rewarding to find if you just enjoy finding things in the game. Speaking of masks, that's one of the more involved side quests, and I love how each mask has its own lore and reception among the people you can show them to. The Keaton mask looks like a fox and is said to be popular with children. The Skull mask is designed to be unsettling, but mostly in a childish way that gets amused reactions from people. And the Spooky mask is universally treated as terrifying given that it's the mask Redeads wear. Once you've sold the first 4, you get to keep the Mask of Truth, which lets you talk to animals and the Gossip Stones, which all have little nuggets of lore or hints about the game. But once you've got those 3 spiritual stones, the rest of the world can only occupy you for so long, and it's time to reconvene with Princess Zelda. Unfortunately, you're too late. Just as soon as you're ready to complete your mission, you're stopped at the closed town gate, and a cutscene plays. Link's nightmare reoccurs in front of his very eyes, with a white horse speeding by and carrying Princess Zelda and her attendant Impa. Link has no hope of stopping them, and she tosses an important item past Link and into the moat. The wicked man from the desert finally makes his proper appearance as he stops his horse just outside the gate, having lost his chance at killing Zelda and Impa. Present before him, though, is Link. At this point in time, these two are virtual strangers, but they both know more about the other than they've let on. Ganondorf tries to make Link tell him where Zelda went, and Link's only answer is to ready his sword and shield, an incredibly ballsy display that earns both my respect and that of Ganondorf. The shield, though, doesn't stop Ganondorf from knocking the living daylights out of poor Link with a magic blast, and then discarding him as not worthwhile. Inside Castletown, there's almost no sign of the rampage Ganondorf went on, with all the citizens minding their own business as usual, a few expressing some concern as to the horses that just sped by, but most none the wiser. The only way you'd even be able to tell anything went wrong is if you peeked into the back alley, and discovered the lone soldier sitting against a wall. If you speak to him, he talks about how he tried to stop Ganondorf, and gives you instructions to head to the Temple of Time, only for him to die right in front of you. With that being your mission anyway, that's exactly where you head, with the Ocarina of Time and the spiritual stones in hand to open the door to the Sacred Realm. You go there, you put the stones on the pedestal, you play the Song of Time, and the door of time opens. It's all very enchanting and impressive, but what lays beyond the door isn't some blinding light or a swirling void or whatever the Sacred Realm is supposed to look like, but an antechamber, holding nothing but a sword placed into a small pedestal. Turns out there's one last key to the Sacred Realm that Zelda didn't tell you about, the Master Sword. Navy looks on in awe, identifying this as the Sword of Legend, and with no other options or instructions, you step up onto the pedestal and remove the sword from its post. What follows is evil music? Against a white void, Ganondorf informs you that he's played you, and has let you open the door to the Sacred Realm while he walks in and swipes the Triforce itself. But how? Why couldn't we stop him? The answer comes from a new character, one who wakes you up and informs you that a lot has changed. It seems like every once in a while the gods of Hyrule act like assholes. This would appear to be one of those times. You awaken inside a glittering, mystical sort of space, on the center of a pedestal in a grand void, and the new character, Rauru, lays out what's happened. You've been asleep for 7 years. The Master Sword, unlike the stones in the Ocarina, is a truly evil-proof item and a sacred weapon, but it can only be wielded by someone capable of being the hero of time. Since Link was deemed too young to fill that role, his spirit was sealed in stasis until he was old enough to carry the title. I mean, you kind of get why the gods did it, because Ganondorf did knock Link smooth on his ass in one blow, but it's still kind of a dick move. More to the point, it allowed Ganondorf free reign to do what he wanted, and once he laid hands on the Triforce, he plunged Hyrule into an unrecognizable place in that time since. Ganondorf's powers are far too great to really do anything about him now, unless sacred sages across the land can be gathered to counteract him. These are 6 individuals, Rauru included, that hold the power to purify and seal away any evil, but it's going to take all 6 of them to stand a chance against Ganondorf now. With that, Rauru sends you out of the Sacred Realm and back to Hyrule, exactly where you were standing when you pulled the Master Sword out. Before you can race off, though, there's another stranger who wants to talk to you. This guy, Sheik, has been waiting for you for a while now, it seems, and has a little more details about the mission Rauru just sent you on. He claims to be the last of the Sheikah, which is crazy because that was supposedly a title Impa held, but whatever. Furthermore, he informs you of the 5 corners of the world where the sacred temples are, and where the sages will be, while also nudging you towards Kakariko, given that you'll need some new equipment before you can even enter any of those temples, with a pretty big hint that Saria is in fact the Sage of the Forest. So, off you go. The first step you take outside of the Temple of Time is a fucking crazy tonal shift, given that the inside of the temple looks exactly the same as it did before you fell asleep. The outside, though, is an absolute mess. The town has been completely ruined, and you get a pretty scenic view of the ominous glowing red ring of death hovering over Death Mountain. It's on utterly visceral display how Ganondorf didn't just lay waste to Castletown, he fucking annihilated it, and what was left is in the worst possible hands, Redeads. They're positioned around the central square, and it's very easy to run into them without meaning to. Before you head directly off to Hyrule Field, I'm of the opinion that every player should detour to Ganon's castle first. That's what it is now, and I truly don't believe Ganondorf has had such a decked-out and majestic, yet utterly evil-looking habitation since. The Pit of Lava is mesmerizing to watch, and the whole black and red and evil look is just mwah, mwah. Plus, you get to look at Link's aghast reaction seeing Hyrule Castle replaced with something so nightmarish. This is, of course, where your final battle will inevitably take place, but before then, there's adventuring to do. Remember how, when Impa sent us in the direction of Kakariko, we actually detoured to Lon Lon Ranch first? Let history repeat itself and go there again now. The ranch doesn't seem all that different at first, until you investigate further. Ingo, the bitter ranch hand from 7 years ago, is running the place now, with Talon having been given the boot. Malon is all grown up, but utterly downtrodden at the situation, given that she has to take orders from Ingo or he'll mistreat the horses. Ingo can say whatever he likes about being a hard, honest worker, but his attitude makes it pretty clear he's running the ranch for money ahead of everything else. If you pay him 10 rupees, he'll let you ride a horse, which, as an adult, you're now big enough to do. You can ride any horse you want, of course, but if you play Epona's song, you can tame the horse you're destined for. Speak to him while riding her, and Ingo will challenge you to a race. The wager is 50 rupees, but if you win, he moves the goalposts and says that if you beat him again, you can keep the horse. Of course, as soon as you do so, he throws a tantrum and locks the ranch gates on you so you can't leave. This is the part where you demonstrate Link's titanic balls and leap the fence on Epona to earn your freedom. I swear doing this with the main gate locked is possible, and it's super satisfying to just leap right over his smug head to freedom, but I can never ever manage to get the angles right, and I always just end up jumping off the wall of the ranch. Either way, Link and Epona ride to freedom together. I love this particular part of Ocarina of Time because it's totally optional and amounts to giving a guy who's kind of a dick a superb middle finger. There's no reason you have to do it, and the game can easily be finished without Epona at all. But she's super helpful for getting across Hyrule Field quickly and has an especially good cinematic moment later. Once that's done, it's time to make your way over to Kakariko. You're not given any direction for this beyond Sheik's vague hint, and while it's nice seeing the villagers that escaped Castletown's destruction, what exactly you're going to need to get into the temple is a complete mystery. You'll have to actually search around and take a careful look at what's different. If you ever explored the graveyard as young Link, you'll have noted some graves marked with flowers. Pulling them back would expose a hole you could fall into to find some scares, rewards, or both. Do a quick corpse count and you'll realize that a new grave has been added near the west side of the field. This will also be your opportunity to see what's become of those bean sprouts you planted 7 years ago. Now they're fully grown, magical floating plants that can take you on rides to special areas, all of which include a piece of heart somewhere. More to the point, that new grave leads to a cave you can enter. In it, you'll find the ghost of Dompe the Gravekeeper himself. He challenges you to a race to keep up with him as he flies through the catacombs. Actually doing so is one of the game's more annoying challenges, and doing it the second time in under a minute for an extra piece of heart is actually one of the most hair-rippingly aggravating things I've ever had to do in any game ever. Whichever developer designed that is evil. But the point is, once you greet Dompe at the end the first time, he gives you his treasure, the hook shot. This is an extendable grappling hook that's fired out on a chain, and can attach to both designated hookshot targets and basically any surface made of wood or softer material like vines, and it is necessary for getting into all 5 of the temples that make up the main dungeons of the adult timeline. You'll play the Song of Time to escape the catacombs, using it to cause designated stone blocks that only respond to this song to disappear. The exit, as it happens, leads directly up into the village's windmill, and this is where you'll stop to learn another song. Guru Guru, the windmiller with the photograph, angrily reminisces about a time 7 years ago that some kid came along and played a song that messed up the windmill and drained the well. If you take out your ocarina, he'll teach you the Song of Storms, the last such song that you'll learn that's not associated with the main quest. Playing it for the first time causes an indoor rainstorm, and the windmill does indeed start spinning very fast under the high winds. The well you can find in the village gets completely drained, but whatever's at the bottom has since been walled off, so we'll have to bookmark this for later. It's time to trade the village for the forest, and that means heading back to Kikiri Forest to see what's become of your old friends. Unlike Malin, who is obviously 7 years older than she was when Link was a kid, none of the Kikiri has aged a single day, looking exactly the same and obviously still holding a childlike mindset. All of them are holed up in their houses given that every outdoors area is now full of monsters, some of them being absolutely massive. You can go to the Deku Tree again if you want, but there are no answers. He's still dead, and the dungeon from before is inaccessible. Your main lead comes from the Kikiri, 2 of whom are missing. Saria is alleged to have made for the forest temple deep in the woods, and Mido is gone too. Not a single one of the Kikiri recognize you as Link, their comrade from 7 years ago. You head off into the Lost Woods, and if you go far enough you'll find the path to the Sacred Forest Meadow blocked off by Mido, who stands guard on Saria's behalf. He doesn't recognize you either, and he won't move aside unless Saria's song is played for him, proving that you know her. There's no tricks to finding your way through the woods this time except memory and trial and error. Once you inevitably reach the Sacred Forest Meadow though, you'll find things noticeably different from before. The low walls seem even lower now that Link isn't so tiny. Unfortunately, the mildly aggressive enemies from before have been replaced by much more fearsome and hostile monsters. You'll have to employ stealth to hit the moblins in the back, with a sword if you're brave or the hookshot if you're smart. Do you remember what I said about a sense of scale? That's part of the magic here. It's not just a specific quality of mass or polygon count, it's about how when you get to the very end of the Sacred Forest Meadow, you're bigger and stronger, but the area itself is exactly the same, completely undisturbed and still doesn't care about you. The aspect of loss is not portrayed through the broken stairway like it would be in Breath of the Wild, but the simple fact that your friend, Saria, isn't sitting there on that stump waiting for you like last time, despite everything else being the same. The game even draws attention to this fact, with Link slowly walking over and staring at the spot where she should be. It's one of my favorite moments in the game, because when playing as a kid, you were venturing out into a very isolated area of the map, and your reward wasn't anything material, but rather just seeing your old friend again. Now that simple intrinsic reward is absent. Fortunately, Link does have other people he can call friend, and one shows up out of nowhere, dropping down in front of him. It's Sheik, the shady stranger from the Temple of Time who sent you all this way. Rather than give you more direction or explain, he instead muses on the cruel quality of time inevitably turning to memory. Then he pulls out a harp and teaches you a song, the Minuet of Forest. There's a song Sheik will teach you for each temple, connected to that area and which will warp you to it anytime you want to go there. That's right, this is the first iteration of the warp feature in a 3D Zelda game. You'll quickly learn that those strange pedestals bearing an insignia in locations around Hyrule, which you'll have seen a few of, are where these songs drop you when teleporting. Once the song is taught, Sheik says he'll see you again, and you're free to enter the Forest Temple. Aim your hookshot at the tree branch above, cross the gap, and dive in. The Forest Temple is one of the best ways to introduce dungeon crawling as adult Link, and has set a standard for every Zelda game to follow. It's a common favorite among Zelda players, and I think that's specifically because it's so impactful as the first dungeon post-time skip. Many have remarked on the design. It's much less a place of worship like the Temple of Time, and more a castle or mansion-like architecture set in a deeply forested area.
Unlike the equivalent dungeons in, say, Wind Waker or Twilight Princess, there's much less of a homemade feel to it, less emphasis on rickety wooden structures or problematic flora, and more on the cold stonework and obviously man-made yet unwelcoming feel of the place. Many have also noted that the Forest Temple is very eerie and unsettling, not in an overt way like the Royal Family Tomb or later dungeons after this one, but more in an edge-of-your-seat nerves kind of way, with the whole structure giving off a very haunted feeling. And I'd like to say how much I love that. I just love it. I love when forest levels have a creepy element to them, especially if it feels like you're leaving the bounds of benevolent civilization and entering a space you shouldn't be in, which is very much the feel of Forest Temple, a place that is deeply connected to nature, yet alien and unwelcoming for that very reason. A huge part of that is the aesthetic, but another huge part of it is the music. You'll get what I mean when you hear it. The Forest Temple's backtrack stands out among some of its peers. In most Zelda tracks, at least for Ocarina of Time, the different elements all sit along their own layers, with obvious backing elements and obvious foreground elements. In this one, all of the competing elements are constantly fading in and out, coming to the fore and then fading towards the back. One of the reasons I think this comes off so unsettling and eerie is the way music is used in this game. Different tracks play at different moments, and in particular, enemy encounter music is usually tied to the player distance from the hostile threat, meaning as you get closer to a Deku Baba, the encounter music gets stronger, whereas if you retreat from it and go somewhere else, it'll fade back to whatever track was playing before. So when you have a track like this in the Forest Temple, it plays with the player's sense of safety and makes them think something is coming at them that they didn't see. In a dungeon where you're as likely to meet a plant monster or giant spider as you are a flaming winged skull or a malevolent ghost, that works to great effect. Stalfos, Pose, and other forms of undead populate the dungeon in harmony with the more nature-oriented monsters like Wolfos and Skulltulas. There's also other monsters with neither a natural nor ghostly vibe, like the Floor Masters and Wall Masters, which serve to add an extra layer of where the fuck have I traveled to in their hostility and disobedience of normal game logic. Wall Masters in particular are a jump scare waiting to happen for any unwary player that doesn't take careful note of Link's shadow getting bigger or the sound of rushing wind threatening to drag them off. There's a bluish fog effect used in the dungeon to obscure distant elements, keeping you from being able to see everything in a room, and creating dark patches where anything could be hiding. Fittingly so, as the task you're completing throughout the dungeon is ghost hunting. When you enter the main chamber of the temple, you're met with an elevator down to the basement floors, where the boss waits, surrounded by 4 torches with different color flames. As soon as you get close, 4 ghosts in matching color robes appear, taking the flames from the torches before scattering to different parts of the dungeon, deactivating the elevator. As such, you've got to go hunt them down and take those flames back in a high-stakes game of hide-and-seek. The Pose sisters, because they are sisters, are another part of what makes the Forest Temple so engaging, because there's a level of detail and characterization to them that is both unnecessary and very interesting, raising so many questions and answering none of them. The bare minimum needed for a player to willingly engage with this fetch quest and find it passable would have been to give us 4 Pose who steal the flames, then ask us to go get them. No more information given. And I know that's the bare minimum because Twilight Princess rehashes this entire shtick in exactly that fashion, no more questions asked. But Ocarina of Time goes further. They all have different colors. Okay, sure, this helps a player to differentiate them and track their progress. But why everything else? These ghost sisters are not only confirmed to be sisters by Navy, but they also have individual names. Youngest to oldest, the green one is Amy, the blue one is Beth, the red one is Joelle, and the purple one is Meg. The actual order of their ages is revealed by Toddle in Majora's Mask, where they reappear, but can also be inferred from the ages of the characters they're named after, those being the central sisters of the novel Little Women. Adding on to this, the girls not only have names and colors, but distinct appearances. They're all blonde, but have different hairstyles, with Amy having a ponytail, Beth having a tight bun, Joelle having messy bangs, and Meg hiding hers in a turban-style headdress. Their expressions also differ too. Amy, the youngest, has an innocent gaze, while Beth looks more cold and disdainful. Joelle has angry eyes, and Meg's slit-eyed stare is downright malevolent. All of this comes together to create unique antagonistic characters you don't know much about, but who are so noticeably distinct from their peers that you just want to know more. Their behavior is undoubtedly in opposition to you, but they seem content to play tricks up until you force them out of hiding. Jo and Beth will hide in paintings and move to different ones if you get too close, requiring you to shoot them with arrows, and Amy is actually hiding in a set of stone blocks. Meg is the most interesting one because you never actually find where she was hiding. You come across her in the main chamber after taking out her sisters, and find her crying and wiping her eyes in the center of the room. This expression of grief is so curious because up until now, Pose, and indeed most enemies, have not altered their singularly hostile behavior towards the player character at all. Most exist in a simple kind of stasis until Link gets close enough to disturb them, with enemies like Tektites just sitting still, and others like Dodongos simply patrolling in circles. The idea that your garden variety enemy actually does unique things without Link's interference is totally unexplored at this point. Unfortunately, there's no chance to talk, because if you get close, she initiates the last fight, splitting into multiple images to confuse you. You'll have to use the bow and arrow you get as the unique weapon here, because Meg is actually proactive enough to dodge sword strikes. This character has an established sisterly relation to other ghosts, mourns their losses, knows unique magic, and is a more capable combatant than other enemies. The fact that you kill her and move on without this matter being explored further almost feels callous. The boss of the dungeon takes the unsettling, cold feeling of the rest of the dungeon and drives it to its maximum. The final area is all dark and dimmed with that blue fog effect, and the chamber is closed off by velvet ropes and almost looks like an art exhibit, with each wall taken up by a massive painting of a dark forest road. Nothing actually jumps out at you in this room, up until you try to leave. The way is blocked with bars, and you turn around and find Ganondorf himself stood right behind you, giant horse and black armor and all. I thought this was the real Ganondorf personally impeding on my adventure back when I first played this, and I'd almost prefer that. Whatever Ganondorf might be, he never did what this Phantom did, and peeled his own fucking face off to reveal a horned skull underneath. Thusly, the battle begins. Phantom Ganon will rise into the air on his horse and leap through the paintings, before riding back down and jumping out to attack. His attacks are pretty hard to counter, and you have to choose between targets, since two phantoms will approach through the paintings just for one to turn back and one to actually attack. If you shoot him enough times like this, he ditches the horse and the paintings altogether and goes for a game of deadly ping-pong with his electric blasts. I had no idea what to do here as a kid, since Phantom Ganon will start blocking your arrow shots, and Navi's vague hint of answer his attack with an attack of your own was frustratingly unhelpful. The key is remembering how Rauru described the Master Sword you're holding, calling it a blade evil can never touch, meaning it outright repels evil, including Phantom Ganon's attacks. This is a pretty risky game to play since your shots can go off course and miss, and the magic blast gets faster each time you or Phantom Ganon knocks it away. But that also means it makes for a very satisfying fight, striking down the most intimidating enemy you've seen thus far, and going in for a good thrashing with the Master Sword. When you finally beat him, you get a message playing in your head from the real Ganondorf, all pompous and smug, but also indicating that he's aware of your movements, before you enter the portal and meet Saria in the Sacred Realm. There's a bittersweetness to the meeting, since with Link now being the hero of time and Saria awakening as a sage, you two are meeting not as friends who get to enjoy any time as companions, but as heroes with a duty to save the world. Saria gives you the Force Medallion, and although you two have to part, she gives you a very important farewell, saying she'll always be your friend. This is one of my favorite parts of awakening sages in this game. They're all distinct people with their own unique relationships to the land and to Link, and the final messages they leave you with speak to their characters and what they feel is most important to leave him with. Link is sent back outside the temple directly to the Deku Tree's meadow, where the Guardian of the Forest once told Link his destiny. The tree is still dead, but Link looks down on the ground just in time to watch a small sprout suddenly explode into a sapling, which has a face and talks to him. The Deku Tree sprout, now able to grow thanks to Ganondorf's evil and the region losing its hold, breaks it down thusly. The Kokiri don't age, and Link has grown up while they've stayed the same because he's actually a highly inborn human. Furthermore, Link's childhood growing up safe in the forest was orchestrated by his dying mother, who fled there during the time of Hyrule's bloody civil war, and asked the Great Deku Tree to raise him as his own. Link, he says, was always destined to find the world beyond the forest, and is now destined to save it. The forest is clear of monsters, and Link is a little stronger and better armed now, so it's time to venture back out into the world and get to freeing the rest of the sages. The adult questline follows the pattern set by the child version, and so your next stop is Death Mountain, as indicated by the glowing red energy cloud over it that screams trouble. First, though, right about now it might be prudent to save the game and take a break. If you do, you'll load the next game session in the Temple of Time, or you can just go there on foot. Once you do, you'll meet Sheik again. He'll tell you that the Master Sword can be returned to the pedestal in order to travel back in time 7 years to your child self's past, and can be drawn again to go forward to present day. In order to make getting back to the Temple of Time on the fly easy, you're then taught the Prelude of Light, the Temple of Time's warp song. But that's for later. Right now, it's onward towards Death Mountain. If you go to Kakariko and start heading up the mountain, you'll see it's more volatile than ever. Giant boulders are falling down the trail, there's evidence of rockfalls everywhere, and the volcano itself still erupts violently if you try to climb too high. If you go to Goron City, you'll see that while it looks the same, the whole place is pretty much empty. The singular Goron present is rolling around the 3rd floor, and he'll spin around and turn the other way if you try to stop him. A well-placed bomb will do the trick, and when you talk to him, you find out that this is Darunia's son, who he named after Link sometime during the time skip. He's freaking out because the Gorons have all been taken to the Fire Temple by Ganondorf's forces, and they're about to be fed to an evil dragon Ganondorf revived to quell further rebellions against his reign of terror. You get a free fire-resistant tunic for calming him down, as well as a pretty big hint about the tool you'll inevitably use to kill the dragon, which is a Warhammer. Not to mention, you also get access to the shortcut into Death Mountain Crater in Darunia's room. Using that trusty hookshot, you can cross the broken bridge and meet Sheik, where you'll hear another speech, this time about the undying power of a strong friendship. You learn the warp song for this area, the Bolero of Fire, and thereupon enter the Fire Temple. The Fire Temple is the only actual dungeon in this game that looks like it could be a place of worship, at least when you first walk in, or with the carvings and the stonework. You'll get the chance to see the boss key early if you step off through a door to the side, but it's inside a cage holding a terrified Goron, so you can't get to it. Instead, you're railroaded into the Western Room, where you'll actually see Darunia in the flesh. In an effort to save his people, he's decided to take on the dragon himself, even though he doesn't have the hammer used in the legend. With a final plea to free and evacuate the Gorons, he goes into the boss chamber and seals the door behind him. Thus begins your journey through the temple. What I like about this temple is how involved it is with the story, in that you actually have to free each Goron to open up the path forward. Not only does each one have a key you can use, but they all give you tips and hints about how to proceed and what dangers are in the temple. Some of these hints are legitimately useful too, such as the ones about playing the Song of Time in suspicious spots or striking walls with your sword to listen for the sound change that indicates they can be bombed. The very first one gives you the most important hint of all, that being how to get into the boss's chamber. The only way to cross the gap in the entrance area is to break the pillar hanging from the ceiling, so the room directly above this one is where you need to go. It's a pretty big journey to get there though. This dungeon introduces new features like rusted switches your weight won't push down alone, and standing switches you have to strike somehow to activate, creating a couple challenges where throwing a bomb just right to hit a switch is necessary to solve its puzzle. What this dungeon teaches you from the jump is to be very, very careful where you step. There's an abundance of very big rooms in this area housing lava pits, boulders rolling back and forth, or fire traps. There's fake doors now that will fall on you if you're not paying close attention, and enemies like the torch slugs will absolutely knock you off a ledge if you aren't careful. And there's 2 specific rooms in which a ring of land is arranged around a giant hole in the floor leading 5 stories down into that lava pit in the basement, one of which is necessary since it houses the Megaton Hammer. In that one, you're asked to almost literally walk a tightrope at a high enough speed to reach the treasure chest without falling off, and then blowing your brains out thereafter. Thankfully, my 12-year-old self kicked in, and after agonizingly failing a number of times, I sprinted it and got in one go without stopping. Fuck yeah! Save the fucking game. Most of the enemies here aren't hard, it's the hazards in the temple that will give you a hard time. Lava and fire are everywhere, and although the Goron tunic resists heat, it doesn't make you immune. One little detail I love is that in rooms where there's lava, there's a heat effect that looks like the same light distortion you see around fire or really hot objects. Little details like that make this game come alive, man. The dungeon's 2 mini-bosses are the Flare Dancers, and I absolutely love them. They're some of my favorite mini-bosses in the Zelda series. Look at this guy. He knows he's serving fun. He's doing backflips, he's doing ballet, he's skating around the arena, literally stunting on him, literally on fire. You've got to blast the armor off the first one with bombs, and by the time you fight the second one, you've got the Megaton Hammer, so you can just smack the ground and shake it enough to knock him on his ass. Once you solve all the puzzles in the temple, you'll be greeted with the boss, Volvagia. This lava snake with googly eyes doesn't really seem like the fearsome burning wasteland of a dragon I was told about, but who knows. Volvagia has one of the more fun boss battles, since your main method of beating him is breaking his fucking skull open with that giant hammer. Let's Plays from the late 2000s unraveled so much about this fight for me. Who really knew before finding out online that you could hit Volvagia with arrows, or dodge his fire attacks by turtling and making him eat his own tail, or that you could climb down the sides of the arena to avoid the falling rocks entirely. This is also the part where you find out Navi is not, in fact, infallible, since if you try her tattle on the dragon, she says she doesn't know its weak point. You win, you get the heart container, and you're transported to the Sacred Realm to meet Darunia, who implicitly got killed by the dragon but was thusly able to ascend as a sage. You're gifted the Fire Medallion, and Death Mountain is calm once more. There's a few things you can do now on your way out of the temple, like meeting a new Great Fairy to increase your magic meter, or going back into the Dongo's Cavern, where there's some extra stuff you can do as an adult that you couldn't do as a kid. On your way back down is probably the last time you'll see Kakariko for a minute, so what I usually like to do here is play the target shooting game for the big quiver. And I guess I was on some demon time when I was a kid, because I remember this being not an easy challenge, but relatively simple with practice. But goddamn if my 30-year-old self wasn't struggling to hit the broadside of a barn. I got it in the end though. It helps that all the fire keys in the fire dungeon make for great target practice. Your next location of interest is, of course, Zora's Domain. Zora's River isn't immediately openly hostile like some other locations, aside from some extra Octoroks. You'll likely see your first new magic bean plant fully grown here, which has grown into a leafy platform that now levitates and can carry you up the length of the river way faster than you can walk it. It's only where you reach the area near the falls where you start to see snow drifting down. The old trick of playing Zelda's Lullaby to open the gate still works, and when you walk through the entrance, you're greeted with ice. Ice everywhere. Yep, if you played Twilight Princess before this game, now you know why they called it unoriginal. The whole of Zora's Domain is frozen over, and that includes the king, still sitting in the same spot he was in 7 years ago. All you can do is head up to Zora's Fountain and see what's going on. Jabu Jabu is missing, most likely having died in the years in between, and the area is so cold that huge chunks of ice are floating in the wellspring. Conveniently, they happen to create a path leading directly into the first quote-unquote side dungeon. I said quote because it's technically required for the story, but it's very menial as dungeons go. This is the Ice Cavern, and the puzzles here revolve around collecting silver gems to open doors, pushing ice blocks, and using the magical blue fire here to melt through the red ice walls that don't respond to normal fire. Doing this leads you to the end of the cave to fight the White Wolfos, a bigger and meaner variant of the Wolfos that still dies in one hit to its tail, so who cares. For your trouble, you're awarded the Iron Boots, which are super heavy boots that drag you down and are useful for walking around underwater. No sooner have you picked them up than Sheik arrives, explaining that all the Zoras, save the princess, are frozen beneath the sheet of ice under their feet. With another remark on the passing of time, he teaches you the Serenade of Water, one of Zelda's most famous songs specifically because of how soothing it is to hear. This song will teleport you to Lake Hylia, where the water temple waits. Lake Hylia is a lot different than it was 7 years ago. For starters, the entire lake bed has dried up, rendering some areas virtually inaccessible. If you go to the central island where a gloomy rain hovers, you can read the inscription on the headstone, which instructs you to shoot for the morning light when water fills the lake, though no immediate way to do that is present. There's a few items you can pick up here, including the golden scale if you catch the biggest fish in the pond, which lets you dive 9 meters into the water. Remember how I said the fishing hole was relaxing last time? Well, now it's infuriating, because if you want that golden scale, you're gonna have to go up against the biggest fish in the pond and catch it. This motherfucker is stupidly tenacious and likes to just break away from your line at random, so it often takes a few tries. But it's worth it if you like challenge runs or getting 100% of the items. But with the minutia out of the way, it's time to talk about the hardest dungeon in the game. Despite how often it's talked up as some kind of traumatic experience, I don't think I've ever felt the water temple was especially difficult, just a little bit confusing. Since it comes right after one of the most linear dungeons in the game, it comes off as unnecessarily complex to some, but if you're like me and enjoy puzzle solving, then it's right up your alley. Of course, I say that as someone who consistently falls victim to third key psychosis, in which the magic of the water temple causes you to think you need 3 keys to get to the 3rd floor west wing, thus causing you to spend an hour looking for a 3rd one that doesn't exist when you really only need 2. So I have been known to get frustrated with it too. The gist is that there's 3 floors with rooms arranged in and around a central pillar, and you have to raise and lower the water levels at select areas by playing your ocarina to open the pathways. The iron boots and the hookshot are crucial since the hookshot is the only tool you can use underwater. I will say that I love the aesthetic of the water temple. The music has an ancient and mystical vibe to it while also being a little bit sinister, and it's a really claustrophobic feel to everything given how tight a lot of the tunnels are and how difficult it is to see if an enemy is nearby sometimes. The art and snow art give off a very feudal-era Japan kind of feel too. You meet Princess Ruto fairly early in the dungeon, and goddamn has she grown up. She mentions Sheik saved her from the ice, and then scolds you for going missing for 7 years when she's supposed to have a husband by now, and then bids you work together to destroy the evil in the temple. Unfortunately, she vanishes shortly afterward, leaving you alone. I mentioned the 3rd floor west wing earlier, and that happens to be the turning point of the dungeon, since that's where the lone mini-boss is. Really, the mini-bosses in this game just eat down as a whole, from Meg to the Flare Dancers to the Iron Knuckles. This one is by far the most iconic though. But just saying that doesn't do justice. I am constantly awestruck by the set piece used for the Water Temple mini-boss, which is the biggest room in the dungeon. You walk through an unlocked door, and all of a sudden the dungeon around you is gone. It's just gone. The door you walked through is floating untethered in a white, foggy void. Shallow water fills the area, calm and still enough that everything around you is perfectly reflected on its surface. There's a lone patch of sand in the middle of the room with a tree, and another detached doorway on the other side. There is absolutely zero context for what just happened or where you are now, and the door behind you is barred. Nothing jumps out at you, Navy doesn't talk to you, and there's no dramatic camera angles or sound cues to fill you in. It's unsettling as hell, and you expect something to come wandering out of the fog towards you. This shit looks like something out of Bleach or Silent Hill. It really drives home that for all they're treated as just business-as-usual dungeons, the temples in Ocarina of Time are sacred places connected with another realm entirely. The only way to go is forward. When you cross the island, something curious happens, so subtle that you might not realize it. Link's reflection in the water is gone. Only when you turn around do you see where it went. It's standing there, back on the island, staring at you, and he waits patiently for you to approach before attacking. This is Dark Link as Ocarina of Time presents him, and he is by far the most interesting take on this character. In previous and other entries, Dark Link was more generically evil, either a manifestation of malice or a servant of Ganondorf. It doesn't seem like Ganondorf's evil actually has anything to do with Dark Link here, since he doesn't disappear into flames like a lot of the other monsters connected to him, and the reflection aspect makes it seem more connected to the water theme than anything else. What's especially curious is the way he reacts to damage. At the beginning of the fight, you can see straight through Dark Link since he's very faint, but he gets darker and more opaque the more you hurt him. Kind of like how still water can be seen through, but disrupted moving water can't be. Navy's battle advice is totally unhelpful and uninsightful, and actually fighting Dark Link can be problematic. Since he mirrors your movements, that means he'll cross swords with you for every attack and you can't deal damage. If you do deal damage, he appears behind you and goes in again. If you go in for a thrust, he actually leaps on top of the sword, proving that Dark Link can do things the real Link can't. You can kind of cheese the fight by using dense fire, which you can't dodge, but that isn't a guarantee of victory. Dark Link's health mirrors your own, so if you're doing a 3-cart run, he's easy, but if you're 100%ing, he's a tough son of a bitch. The actual way to beat him involves thinking outside the box and turning off the lock-on. You wouldn't think to do this normally, since your targeting system has been useful in every single encounter and has been completely ingrained into you. But if you stop using it and go in aggressively, Dark Link stops being able to predict your moves, and you can land consistent damage. It's kind of badass in a sense. You have to throw away the training the game gave you and just use your spatial awareness. Dark Link bars the way to the long shot, the extended length hookshot that serves as a dungeon's item. From there, it's just a few more rooms to get the boss key, and then before you know it, you're fighting Morpha, the boss. The introduction to Morpha is so freaking genius. You enter a small room filled with water where a voice, seemingly Ruto's, calls out to you, warning you not to touch the water. Nothing happens until you jump to one of the 4 central islands. You get the signature Jaws perspective as something in the water swims around, eyeing its potential victim. The kicker, though, is that the creature rises up past head level and is still looking through the water as it does. That's right, the water itself is the boss. Or rather, the giant amoeba controlling it, as it were. But that distinction is so small it really doesn't matter. It was 1997, and Nintendo were working on the very first 3D Zelda game ever made, and some guy had the bright idea of creating a boss that was essentially animate, hostile water moving in real time. And instead of saying, no, that's too complicated, we can't make that work, the sons of bitches actually did it. That's actually brilliant. Morpha isn't that aggressive as an attacker, but you're pressed for space since the walls are lined with spikes, the islands are easy to fall off of, and getting too close to those water tendrils will result in Morpha ragdolling Link up and down the walls, which is surprisingly crazy action coming from a basketball-sized blob of water. Morpha is also jumpy and active enough that landing a hit with the hookshot can be tricky. Once you drag it into sword striking range enough and whack it a few times though, it dies. Ruto's Sage Awakening scene is a little bittersweet, since rather like Saria, she laments that she can't live a life with Link since her duty in the Sacred Realm prevents it. She does ask him to thank Sheik for saving her, and also lets him in on something important. Princess Zelda is still alive. Sheik, as it happens, is waiting right outside, watching for the moment Link wins the battle, and sure enough, water fills the lake again at the moment of his victory. It's a short congratulations before Sheik is making another quick getaway. The only thing left to do is fulfill that prophecy on the grave marker. Remember how it said shoot for the morning light when water filled the lake? It just so happens to be morning when you land on the island again after getting the water medallion. If you shoot an arrow directly towards the sun from that spot, it floats back down to the water's edge as a fire arrow, giving you the ability to launch magical conflagrating arrows. There's absolutely no story purpose for this, but it is very, very cool. But then, where do we go from here? This is where following the pattern runs short. The Child Link timeline stopped after completing dungeons attached to the natural world aspects of forest, fire, and water, and now you've done the same thing in the adult timeline, while having explored all the familiar areas to boot. So what now? The game actually gives you a choice of which temples and medallions to pursue next, those being the Spirit Temple or Shadow Temple. And for some reason, I don't know why, everyone seems to behave as though the intended order is Shadow then Spirit, which bothers the fuck out of me. The Spirit Temple is where you learn more about Ganondorf's culture and history, and the Shadow Temple is where you learn more about Hyrule's history at large. Besides the fact that it's more aesthetically pleasing to bookend the journey by starting with the Light Medallion and ending with the Shadow Medallion, it makes no thematic sense to go to the Spirit Temple last. Doing the Spirit Temple fourth, and seeing the world beyond just the aggrieved prosperity of Hyrule, helps you get to know the real scope of your quest and why you really need to stop Ganondorf. Then you come back to Hyrule and look into its heart, its dark secrets, and look at the parts of it that the Gleaming Legacy doesn't show you, and determine to save it anyway. That's why the Sage of Shadow is the one closest to Zelda, since when you meet them, that's when you yourself are closest to finding Zelda again. Trying to say you're supposed to do the Spirit Temple last because Sheik mentioned the Goddess of the Sand last is just corny, come on. But it doesn't matter right now anyway. Before you can get into either of those areas, you need more equipment than you've got. And since you're out of options for the time being, it's time to make use of that Master Sword. Remember how Sheik said you could return the Master Sword to the pedestal and go back in time 7 years? It's time to do that. After a stunning cutscene, it's nice to go back to being a kid again and having the town not be destroyed and full of redeads. The goal here is Kakariko Village. Remember how when first coming here as an adult you learned the Song of Storms from that crazy windmill guy? The last time you played it, it drained the well, but the passageway down there had already been walled off. This time we'll get to see what's down there. You go back to the windmill, play the Song of Storms, drain the well, hop down there and go through the tunnel that waits for you, and... what the fuck? Whatever the expectation that most players had was, it probably landed closer to like a wet sewer system with some bats and spiders, and that's it. When you actually get down there, you walk straight into the game screaming, in your face. The tonal whiplash feels like a borderline hate crime, but it's somehow one of my favorite parts of the game. I love that the game pulls this trick and comes out of left field swinging. It's a nasty surprise, but a good one. The bottom of the well is not just eerie or creepy, it's downright malevolent. Little Kid Link has just been plunged into a place that screams torture basement, where literal mounds of gore and body parts have piled up in the corners, where there's bloodstains under hideous devices, where entire walls and floors are made out of entombed remains, where things stop making sense completely. Emphasis on that last part, because the bottom of the well starts playing tricks on your mind. You'll just be walking around and you'll fall right through the floor, or an enemy will pop out of the wall. Half the brickwork under your feet in this place isn't even real. It feels incorrect to say that these fake floors and walls are an illusion because that makes it seem more actively magical than it probably is, but it's also obviously not a hallucination. Rather, it feels like what you're seeing might have actually been real once, and whatever evil dwells here has pulled the rug out from under you in a literal way. Wandering through this dungeon is hellishly stressful. Your last experience with the bubble monsters, those floating winged skulls in the dungeons, wasn't exactly heart-stopping, but now that you're a kid again, it's terrifying. There is no reason for that thing to be that goddamn big. Then you have the skeletons and the strange carvings in the walls that maybe can hear whispering, warning of danger nearby. The music is utterly nightmarish, all sinister and discordant. It's also very easy to fall through the floor, and then you're down in the basement with re-deads, which is already bad enough, but the toxic water down here has flowers growing up out of it that are actually skeletal hands reaching out. So amazingly fucked up. You'll have no idea what you're actually looking for down here while exploring, so this is when it pays to listen to what NPCs have to say. If you talked to all of the NPCs in Kakariko as an adult, you'll have heard at least one of them say that a quote-unquote man who could see the truth used to live there, and that his house stood where the well is now, and that NPC was careful to note that he wasn't just really good at using his third eye. If you have Navy translate what one of the spirits says, they'll tell you to look for the Eye of Truth. Finding the Eye of Truth is actually as simple as going far into the main room and playing Zelda's Lullaby to drain the water, then following the drainage path back towards the entrance. Keep going, and you'll meet one of the most fucked up entities in any Zelda game, and quite possibly in any game ever. The Dead Hand is the boss in this dungeon, and quite honestly, I have to say that whatever Aonuma's team was smoking when they made this thing must have been some next level shit. I'd like to further clarify that I want none of it for myself, but will still much commend the results. Its chamber is a mass grave, and 4 long arms extend up to the filthy floor waiting for prey to wander nearby. The only way to initiate battle with it is to intentionally get caught in its trap, at which point it reveals itself. Just saying that this creature looks like it stepped out of Resident Evil or Silent Hill is not quite enough to describe it. Berserk might be a more accurate comparison. It is completely discordant with the entire rest of the game's host of enemies, which all resemble humans, plants, animals, or statues, or predictable monster variations thereof. The body of this creature is bloated, swollen, deathly pale, and covered in bloodstains. Its arms end in bloody stumps, its face has no eyes in its sockets, and its long neck, spider-like behavior, and odd way of moving mark it as completely different from any human starting point. It looks like a mockery of human shape and form, some sort of nightmare brought to life that crawled out of the darkness to feast on flesh. And you have to fight it. Since its body doesn't respond to any attacks, the only way to kill it is to get within striking distance of its head, and wait for it to go in for a bite. Deal enough damage and it'll retreat, just to try again when you next get caught by one of its hands. You do it enough times and its jaw separates as it collapses and dies. Your reward is the Lens of Truth. Again, despite the trauma, I love this part of the game. It's the first time where the game suggests that Hyrule is maybe not all that nice, and that some parts of its past are a lot uglier and blood-soaked than previously let on. It also ties into Link's association with courage, the aspect chosen to represent the goddess for war. These are the kinds of horrors that a grown person with many times his age and experience could easily respond to with, "Fuck this, I'm out." But since it's Link, he doesn't back down. Also relevant is the sense of scale I was bringing up earlier in the video. The horrors at the bottom of the well look so much more awful when playing at a smaller size, after having been so used to the way adult Link takes up space and stands on an even level with most of the monsters, with you no longer able to predict the way things are going to go or what sorts of creatures will be after you down the road. You can stay in the bottom of the well and clean it out of further goodies if you want, though no one will blame you if you skedaddle expeditiously. Now is an equally good time to go around doing any miscellaneous stuff you were putting off from the kid timeline, like gold Skulltula hunting. If you're more towards getting to the rest of the adventure though, then you can decide which part to do next. For me, I head directly west to Gerudo Valley. Why? Because that's where my brain tells me to go, duh. As a kid, I was so frustrated by the fact that there was an obvious part of the world just beyond my reach, and the stupid lady guarding the gate wouldn't let me through. Now that I'm all grown up as Link, it's time to go do all that shit I couldn't do before, right? Going to Gerudo Valley actually reveals that the bridge is out as a whole, so no guards necessary. Now, you can be the most boring person in existence and just hookshot your way across, or you can be a Chad and go call your horse. Riding Epona across the bridge and jumping the entire valley in one go nets you the most badass cutscene in the game. And I am so thrilled that it does. When you meet up with the guy on the other side, he says his team of carpenters all quit on him and tried to go join up with the Gerudo thieves, and to maybe see about dragging their asses back. And thus you enter the Gerudo fortress to do just that. The Gyarados Fortress is essentially a stealth section of the game, and a pretty good one at that. The all-female Gyarados people are isolated, hostile to outsiders, and don't take kindly to intrusions, so your presence is pretty unwelcome. The 4 carpenters have all been locked up in cells, and you'll have to navigate around a kind of confusing layout with multiple entry and exit points on multiple floors to find the cells, and your goal is to do so without getting caught, either avoiding the guards or hitting them with arrows to knock them out. You have to exercise some caution since getting spotted will immediately land you in the cell, but it's okay since you can just hookshot out and you actually have a pretty good sniping post from there. They have a really bad spatial awareness anyway, so as long as you're not within 10 feet of them when they turn around, it's usually fine. Finding each carpenter results in a sword duel with one of the prison's guards, and I always love that. They always make sure to drop down from the ceiling when Link's back is turned, they move pretty quickly and can take a few hits, and they have a move that can actually instantly defeat Link if it isn't blocked or dodged. It's like a souped-up Stalfos fight, and it's made clear that these Gyarados ladies aren't messing around. Only when you defeat the 4th and final one does the hostility relent. You're approached by the leader of the fortress who's taken a shining to your skills, and gives you a pass to come and go without being attacked. She also drops some info about the Spirit Temple and the leaders of the Gyarados. Their king is the Great Ganondorf, and their second in command is the Exalted Noboru, which is a crazy amount of respect on her name. The citizens of Hyrule don't even talk about Zelda with the word exalted. Goddamn. There's 2 things you can do here before heading off. One is the Gyarados Training Grounds, an optional side dungeon filled with fun little challenges that test your skills you've learned this far, but actually completing it requires an item you won't have yet. So if you're like me and hate having to leave places and come back later, you'll just put it off until then. There's also the horseback archery range, which is incredibly fun to practice at. When you get good at nailing those jars with those arrows, you feel like a bona fide badass. But anyway, the temple. The Spirit Temple lays in the middle of a vast desert, but getting there is a bit of a trial unto itself. The first barrier is the River of Sand, essentially a giant river of quicksand that you can't cross on foot. I think this is why people think you need the hover boots to get this far, even though you don't. You can literally just long shot across. You do need the hover boots to access the little floating merchant's bombs you've entered to the side, but that's hardly that important. After that, you follow the trail through the sandstorm until you come to a little altar, where a friendly Poe will lead you through the rest of the way, but you'll need the Lens of Truth to actually see her. And the Zelda Wiki has got me fucked up acting like the Lens of Truth is optional in this matter. Have you ever tried to navigate this bullshit from memory, let alone from scratch? It's a nightmare, it doesn't work. I'll fight a whole nother dead hand before I try that garbage. At the end of the trail, you come to the Desert Colossus, a vast building with an enormous stone statue carved into its face, and one of the crazier things this game did with this design. Like, are you seeing this shit? This is incredible. It's not pre-rendered either, you can actually interact with the statue itself. I love that. The actual desert sand here is a huge pain in the ass thanks to the levers, these weird plant monsters that harass you constantly if you walk on it, which is so annoying. But there's a couple interesting things to do here, including creating a fairy fountain by using the Song of Storms on the dried up oasis, and an actual fairy fountain you can find that houses the last of the 3 divine spells. The temple itself is not much to look at. It's pretty cool to see the inside with its giant snake statues, but there's nowhere to go. You try to go left, there's a hole you're too big to crawl through. You try to go right, there's a stone block not even SpongeBob could get moving. So you go back outside, and who do you meet but Sheik? Sheik spells it out for you. This isn't a dungeon you can complete with just the adult abilities. You're taught the Requiem of Spirit, the warp song that will allow you to come back here as a kid, and once you do, the show starts in earnest. At a glance, the interior of the Spirit Temple is identical to the child timeline, but for one new feature. A woman is crouched near the hole on the western side. This is the Exalted Noboru herself, and she happens to be one of my favorite characters in this game, mostly because she's just cool. She's chill as fuck. When she meets Link, the latter making himself helpful, she explains that the Gyarados are an all-female race, and only one man is born once every 100 years, who must inevitably become their king. But she's firmly disavowed Ganondorf on account of the latter's malicious acts, which go beyond the ways of Gyarados thievery and into indiscriminate evil. To that end, she's in the Spirit Temple to try and disrupt his plans. And since Link is so down to help, she gives him the plan. Crawl through the hole and get her the silver gauntlets so she can move the stone barrier on the eastern side. Noboru's demeanor is a lot like a big sister, with her own way of teaching her little sibling how to stir up trouble. It sets her apart from other NPCs and makes her feel like an independent but connected part of the world. I like her a lot. The Spirit Temple is more involved than other dungeons, in that the first half is designed for Kid Link and makes use of his abilities, while the second half makes use of Adult Link. Each of the dungeon's 2 treasures rests on the hands of the Colossus, and getting past them requires beating the Iron Knuckles guarding them. The Iron Knuckle is my kind of challenge, in that they're very easy to beat so long as you don't get overconfident and take a hit from that giant axe that wipes out your entire past and future bloodlines in one go. They move slow, so they're easy to hit, but slingshot seeds and arrows won't get through the armor, and they can take a fuck ton of hits. So it becomes a game of cat and mouse, getting your hits in and dodging the axe strikes. Once you finally do enough damage, the heavier bits of armor fall off, enabling them to run, which is terrifying. Of course, this also means they're now vulnerable to ranged attacks, so you can pepper them with arrows to your heart's content. There's 2 key items in the Spirit Temple instead of just 1, although that sentence sort of implies you use the silver gauntlets for anything more than just moving one really big block. The other treasure is the Mirror Shield. It's probably the worst item in the game for how you make precisely 0 meaningful uses of it beyond the dungeon you get it in, but the ways you do use it are really, really cool. It can reflect light and energy, and this is used not only to solve puzzles, but for a pretty cool boss fight. The Spirit Temple just has a lot going on for it. It's not my favorite dungeon for the structure or the puzzles, and in fact some of those kind of suck. But it's a great dungeon for how much relevant the plot happens here in between walking in and walking out. Kepora Gebora, the owl familiar that follows Link around and pops up during certain parts of his journey, makes his final appearance here. You also witness Naboru getting attacked and kidnapped by Kumi and Kotake, 2 hags living in the temple who are not just in league with Ganondorf, but actually raised the son of a bitch. The scene where you watch her getting taken away is pretty disturbing on its own, as she's sucked down into a portal and calls for Link to escape, and when you meet her again, it's even worse. That last iron knuckle that the witches send after you, it was actually her in that armor, brainwashed and forced to do Ganondorf's bidding for 7 years. If you think about it, she had a really awful fate just on that alone. She's the only person in the Gerudo clan who actually seems to want to fight back against Ganondorf's evil, and her last independent thought is wondering if she dragged some innocent little kid into the path of monsters like these. No sooner has she been knocked loose from her brainwashing than the 2 witches in question show up and attack her again. So although you only get 2 scenes with Naboru, Kumi, and Kotake before fighting them, they definitely make the most of their screen time. The latter 2 definitely back up their smug attitude, considering that literally nothing you attack them with will work except their own magic, hence the Mirror Shield. And it makes for one of the most epic and satisfying battles in the game, not to mention one of the funniest scenes. The Spirit Temple just slaps, man. But now we head back towards Hyrule, and to one of my favorite dungeons in the game. After completing the other dungeons, if you return to Kakariko in the adult timeline by coming through the front gate, you get a unique scene. The sky is overcast and there are buildings that are on fire, with the place evidently having come under attack. Link races up and finds Sheik staring into the well. All that he says is for Link to get back, before the water drop beam is smashed and launched a few dozen yards away. Something invisible flies out of the well, grabs Sheik, ragdolls him, and then tosses him away like trash while Link can only watch. The creature flies around the village, leaving a shadow in its wake, before rounding on Link, who readies himself for the assault. All we get is a fade to black, the sounds of Link being beaten unconscious, and that's it. I love this scene for several reasons, chiefly how dark and humbling it is. I've talked before about the dark elements in Ocarina of Time and the creepy stuff, but even then it was not an immediate, present threat that would attack you outside of a designated area. It's good because it shows Link might be the hero, but he's hardly invincible. By this time, you're very late in the game and have most of the equipment and skills you'll need, and yet this ancient evil still beats Link so badly it has to cut to black instead of showing it. You actually visited the well as a child and killed some utterly nasty monsters, so you would think the well itself wouldn't have any more surprises. Turns out the craziest monster in there is fast, invisible, and malevolent, and has no trouble treating the hero of time like one more NPC. This is also one of the best moments for Sheik, and it influences my insistence that this part become the latest in the adult timeline chain of dungeons, after the Spirit Temple. Throughout his appearances in Link's adventure, Sheik has come off well-meaning, but also capable of trickery and sly, such that Link can't keep up. After the first appearances in the Temple of Time and Sacred Forest Meadow, Link will start trying to approach Sheik after learning his songs, as if determined to unmask him and find out who he really is. Each time he fails due to Sheik's magic or tactics to keep his identity hidden. In this scene in Kakariko, not only is Sheik completely overwhelmed by the evil just like Link is, but he drops the mysterious poet angle and gets very serious, telling Link that Impa, Zelda's attendant, is the Sage of Shadow, and has gone to the Shadow Temple to seal it away again, and will be in grave danger without help. Once you learn the song, he agrees to help the villagers and look out for them while Link goes to the temple. At the end of the scene, Sheik beats his usual retreat, and Link doesn't even try to stop him. Maybe because he feels like he already knows who it is at this point, or maybe because there's just more pressing concerns at the moment. This is also the only time in which the immediate threat is not related to Ganondorf. Impa is already awakened as a sage, and the evil they're dealing with is far older than Ganondorf or his machinations, an evil connected to the land itself rather than a foreign takeover. As such, you're encroaching on its territory, not the other way around. Once you get to the Shadow Temple proper, the first thing you'll note is the torture dungeon aesthetics and creepy music are back. And you're like, oh, great, I was worried this would be a one-time thing. The temple makes heavy use of the lens of truth, and its first few areas will have the spirits in the temple openly speaking to you, warning you of dangers hidden in the darkness and saying that this place is where Hyrule's ugliest secrets are, where its bloody history of greed and hatred gathers. If the bottom of the well didn't make it clear enough, Hyrule's had some very nasty things to hide for a long, long time. There's another dead hand in here, ready to traumatize you all over again, and beating it rewards you with the hover boots. The Shadow Temple makes heavy use of that, too. After clearing out the top floor, you start making your descent downwards, and for the duration of your adventure here, that's the one thing you'll stay doing. Down, down, and down further still. The Redeads and Wall Masters are back, along with the mass graves and piles of gore, not to mention a new one: guillotines. Like, hallways full of guillotines for no goddamn reason. Also, they added wind fans that'll slide you into traps or off the ledges. There's a fun little trick with the ladder where you can switch from the hover boots to the iron boots, which weigh you down so much that the force of the winds can't blow you around. This is also how I found out that Redeads won't attack you if you wear the iron boots around them, which is hilarious. The reason for this is that Redeads are apparently blind and track prey through noise, which is why they'll attack you if you run near them, but stay docile if you only walk. The iron boots prevent you from running, which makes sense, but the amount of noise you make when walking in them just makes this funny as hell. One of the best parts of the dungeon is when you ride the ferry near the end. There's a huge boat floating on what I guess is the River of the Dead, and the signpost even says that this is where you can go to ride the ferry to hell. They don't say that, obviously, they say Otherworld, but you get the picture. Stalfos will attack you on the ride, and if you get too distracted fighting them, you'll sink with the ship when it reaches the end of its journey, and unexpectedly falls out from underneath you. There's no big puzzles to solve or traversal to do for the boss key. It sits in one of a few rooms with some very small tasks. I love that you can see, in the big room just before the boss area, the huge gap in the two bird statues across from it. And you can already see that Impa was here by the one collapsed statue, which I guess she destroyed behind her to keep anyone from following her. You can just blow the other one up, of course, and head in for the final showdown. Before I get to the boss itself, I just want to say the lead up to it is pure aura. You ride the actual ferry to hell to get this far, and then when you go further, the boss door lies on the other side of a huge abyss with just darkness between you and it. There's invisible platforms, of course, but even then, the room is just so intimidating. Make sure not to wear the hover boots when opening the boss door, or you'll slide right into the hole that leads down into it, and won't get to examine all those lovely corpses lining the walls all the way down. While this could just be another mass grave, I think the skull patterns in the walls look different in the dark blue than they do in dark brown. Less like corpses and more like carvings. It would be so chilling if the remake put more detail on this and had the walls to be lined with the souls of the damned, all twisted together to create the temple itself. You fall down that hole and land on a giant drum. The evil creature that escaped the well is waiting for you here, and if you think the two giant hands drumming on it are intimidating, the full look of the beast itself is at least as fucked up as the dead hand. It's this twisted torso with the head and arms severed and a giant red eye growing out of the neck stump. I love the concept of the most insidious looking thing in this game just toying with its drum while it's trying to kill you. Bongo Bongo is obviously in reference to the drum, but sounds just off-center enough that you could see it being some foreign or indigenous word in Hyrule that probably means something specific, the same way that the Hawaiian word mahi mahi means really strong. Only in this case it means really evil and scary holy shit. And it's definitely at home here, just drumming on the only piece of land available to you and humming along with the battle music. Surrounding the arena is toxic water and then just infinite darkness everywhere. The only things you can see are what's under your feet and the giant demon's hands, plus the rest of its body if you use the Lens of Truth. Bongo Bongo is the toughest boss in the game, and also the most aggressive attacker, which is bad since you already can't land shots easily thanks to the beating it's doing on the drum. This is where the hover boots come in, allowing you to sit stable in the air just long enough to get the arrow shots off. Once you take out its hands, Bongo Bongo charges you, which is your cue to stun its eye and go in for the kill. Once you do, it spasms, dies, and melts into more darkness, after which Impa meets you in the Sacred Realm. She reminisces on the last time she saw Link, and then reassures him that not only is Princess Zelda safe, but that he'll meet her again soon. With that, the only thing left is the final showdown. You meet Sheik back in the Temple of Time, where he explains what really happened 7 years ago. Ganondorf entered the Sacred Realm, yes, but he didn't get the entire Triforce. A legend only the Sheikah know explains that the goddesses actually built a failsafe into the Triforce, and that anyone who wants that level of divine power must have a heart that's in balance. If that person's heart is impure, then the Triforce will split into 3, leaving in their grasp only the one representing the force one most believes in: power, wisdom, or courage. The other 2 will fly off towards individuals selected by destiny. Ganondorf has used the Triforce of Power to become an unstoppable evil king, but he won't be satisfied until he has the complete Triforce. The wielder of the Triforce of Courage, Sheik says, is actually Link himself. The wielder of the Triforce of Wisdom, as it happens, is Sheik, whose real name is Zelda. This was a crazy reveal back in the day, and I know it had some gamers' heads spinning. You couldn't pull this off today without 50 different reassurances that Zelda did not, in fact, magically give herself a penis to hide from Ganondorf's attention all this time. Zelda apologizes for both the deception and the state of the world, saying she was young and couldn't grasp the full consequences of the ploy she tried to pull off, and Link getting sealed into the Sacred Realm for 7 years threw a huge wrench into everything. She gifts Link the Light Arrow, a sacred magical arrow that can destroy evil,
right before Ganondorf peers into the Temple of Time from the big telescope on his castle wall and promptly seals her into a crystal. Zelda is then kidnapped and held hostage, so that Link must then come rescue her and put Ganondorf within reach of both the missing pieces of the Triforce. And Link is not about to disappoint. Ganon's castle is very regal and intimidating, but nothing that hasn't been seen and survived before. You dispel 6 magical barriers, 1 for each sage, and then climb the central tower, cutting down enemy forces as you do. Finally, it's Ganondorf versus Link, a confrontation that's been set up since the very beginning with Link's prophetic dream. Ganondorf is, get this, actually playing the fucking organ when you walk in. No, really, he is. He's playing his own theme song, and you can actually hear it getting louder as you get closer to his boss chamber. It's just so stupid as to circle back around into amazing. Less funny is when he actually starts the battle. Ganondorf will employ the same tennis match back and forth that Phantom Ganon did, which should make it easy, but the caveat is that you can't actually target Ganon. He's radiating waves of darkness that keep Navi from getting close to him, and as a result, your lock-on is disabled. Pulling the rug out from under a player at the 11th hour like this is absolutely brutal, especially since even successfully knocking Ganondorf into submission doesn't clear him for a sword strike, and you have to follow it up with a manual first-person light arrow that is very, very easy to miss. Credit where it's due though, running up and slashing his ass is very satisfying when you finally knock him down. Ganondorf's cape will get more and more shredded the more damage you deal, and eventually he'll start spamming a super attack that is way less tedious to reflect than his standard one. Link emerges victorious, and Zelda is freed from her prison, at which point the castle starts collapsing around you, and it's time for an escape sequence. Nothing's too difficult, and at this point, unless you're doing a 3-heart run, you don't have much of a chance of dying. But it's very fun and exciting, and you get a great final boss battle for your trouble. Ganondorf, half-dead and gasping for breath, makes a last-ditch effort to kill the heroes in the ruins of his own castle, and uses the Triforce of Power to become a giant monster. This, my friends, is what you call pure fucking aura. Ganon stands tall, virtually all sentience gone, and reveals the full might of his power. There's the boss cut-in like usual, but instead of having a subtitle preceding his name, all you get is Ganon. One word, all caps, simple and extremely effective. Attempts to replicate this in future Zelda games just hasn't worked. It works in Ocarina of Time because each boss and subsequent victory over them represents a step in a journey towards this specific conflict. Ganondorf is at the center of Ocarina of Time's conflict, and is its eventual final challenge from a very early outset. The Skyward Sword version of this just doesn't work, because Girahim is carrying so much of the plot instead of Demise. The Twilight Princess version of this wouldn't even work if they tried, for a similar reason with Zant. But the final battle to start with Great King of Evil Ganondorf, only for that to get peeled back and reveal simply Ganon beneath, strips away all pretense, all unnecessary detail, and says, "Here, this is the true face of evil." It's the darkness that sells it too. The final battle is pitch black, and Ganon will just be a large black shadow with eerie glowing eyes until the lightning strikes illuminate him. At every other point, he looks like darkness given shape and form, a culmination of evil beyond comprehension. The fact that the final battle, right now, asks you to deal with Ganon without the Master Sword is icing on the cake. It's a very important moment because it tasks you, the player, with guiding Link through this battle. You have to prove that you have what it takes to be the hero, with or without divine, evil-smiting swords. You get it back in time, of course, to lay the killing blow and put the matter to rest, but just the fact that they take it away from you for the first half of the battle is incredibly ballsy. Is Link's success guaranteed because he was chosen to wield that sword? Or is it assured because only he has the steel balls and raw skill to do so? And what a killing blow it is. Zelda holds Ganondorf down while Link goes in with that Master Sword and cuts that motherfucker's face to ribbons, right before stabbing him straight through the skull. The sages take over right then and there, combining their power to open the Sacred Realm and seal Ganondorf away. It is an absolutely perfect final battle. And with that, the game is won. Ganondorf is seen cursing his enemies with his final breath as he is sealed away, swearing to go after their descendants one day. In the Sacred Realm, Zelda and Link at last have a chance to talk about their respective fates again. Zelda decides to make up for her hubris by closing the door to the time stream and sending Link back to his childhood to regain his lost years, and give him the chance to grow up as a person rather than as a warrior. Link, for his part, does seem to hesitate a bit before he gives her the ocarina. and you can see him turning the wheels in his head, knowing he wants his own life, but wondering if he should give up the adult timeline he's experienced so much of in exchange for it. But he ultimately does it. The staff credits roll as we get one last look at the timeline Link is leaving behind, the citizens of Hyrule and the wider world rejoicing now that Ganondorf is gone. Old tensions have been put aside as the Gerudo party alongside the Hylians, with even Ingo and Talon having put aside their differences. Though not everyone looks so pleased. Off to the side, you can see King Zora and Mido looking forlorn, and it's a reminder that when Ruto and Saria became sages, they had to leave their old lives and family behind. Maybe not forever, since the sages then gather at the peak of Death Mountain. Maybe they don't have to stay in the Sacred Realm for eternity. But the matter stays unresolved. Back at the Temple of Time, Link steps away from the pedestal, leaving the Master Sword behind and once again his child self. It seems, at this moment, that it comes time for friends to part ways. There's no dialogue, nor any break in the scene whatsoever, as Navi flies up through the window in the Temple of Time, into the light, and away. The game ends on the final shot of Link, finding his way back to the castle courtyard and meeting a young Princess Zelda once again. Throughout the writing and making of this video, I highlighted certain things I felt represented my love of this game. What I did at the end is try to find a single thoroughfare connecting all the things I liked, but that didn't really work. Things came up more than once, like scale and a sense of whiplash from sudden changes, not to mention really exciting moments, but these alone don't serve to explain why I love the game so much. I think the truth of the matter is simply that Ocarina of Time was a moment where Nintendo was really good at getting their vision across. Link is a silent protagonist, and there was no voice acting in Zelda games back then, and the transition to 3D could have been really clunky if they hadn't handled it carefully. There's so many times in this game where if you pay extra attention, you get rewarded for it, either materially or intrinsically. There was a real skill in getting concepts across, which is why dungeons like Jabu Jabu's Belly and the Forest Temple stand out so much. Despite the frozen faces on most characters, there is a lot of emotion in the movements and expressions they make. There was maximum investment in the medium even if the technology hadn't hit its stride yet. There was also a real sense of advancement and a willingness to test player skills. The shift to adult Link asks you to start getting around without all the tools you picked up as a kid, and likewise, after you're used to using your new adult skills, the game then asks you to go back to Child Link and adapt to those same adult level threats with different tools. I could read super deep into the story to find that overarching theme that I could then insist runs through the game like a thread, but honestly, I don't really think I need to. The reason this game is so beloved is because it was made with a lot of love, with a real desire to bring something brilliant to fans of the series. That love shows through in almost every part of the game, and that's why it stands the test of time despite the technological aspects being dated. This is fundamentally the same reason why people love Breath of the Wild so much, and I fear that that's something Nintendo has lost. We all saw the news of not the first, but the second remake of Ocarina of Time, and predictably the timeline is full of all the things they're willing to be hyped about and what possible changes they could make. A terrifying portion of fans actually seems to want this series to go the Resident Evil direction, and remake basically the entire catalog, which feels like something Nintendo is just greedy and amoral enough to do despite this already being the second most popular gaming franchise on the planet. Could they do it a second time? Could they work that magic again? I think we're all a little bit doubtful, but we'll have to see. But a timeless game is a timeless game. For all the talk of nostalgia filters, Ocarina of Time will always reward people willing to engage with it honestly. That's how I managed to have such fun with it at ages 10, 20, and 30. And you can too. Go to your local retro shop and grab that GameCube or Wii, or even an N64. Fire it up. I promise you, you'll fall in love. Hey, so if you made it to the end of this video, you're an absolute icon. This is the longest video I've made to date, and it was a crap ton of hard work making it. If you want to leave me some feedback, by all means do so. I love hearing things from people, and if you want to help me out, all you have to do is subscribe. I look forward to making more videos like this because despite how jaded I am about the gaming industry, I'm passionate about the parts I love.
I hope you're healthy, I hope you're happy, and I hope you have a great day.